Chapter 1. The Letter. What if Lord Commander Mormont discovered Jon Snow's true birth before the mutiny at Craster's Keep and sent him south with Longclaw? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. Craster's Keep sits in the haunted forest, like a wound that never healed. Low walls of rotting timber. A roof that leaks smoke and cold in equal measure. 44 men of the Night's Watch, breathing the same stale air inside it. And every one of them is angry, and half of them are afraid, and none of them are willing to say which. It is deep in the night. The fire is low. Jon Snow sits his watch near the door with Longclaw across his knees, the white stone direwolf of the pommel catching the last red light from the coals. He runs his thumb along the flat of the blade, the way he has done 100 times since Mormont gave it to him. The Valyrian steel lighter, and sharper than anything Jon has held before. 3 fullers cut into the blade to shed the weight. It is half a foot longer than a standard sword. It is a bastard sword for a bastard boy, and Jon has told himself that joke so many times it has stopped being funny. Around him the brothers sleep, or pretend to. Some of them are not pretending. Some of them haven't truly slept since the fist. Jon was there. He remembers the cold and the silence before the whites came. The way the horses knew before any man did. The screaming of the animals, and then the screaming of the men. He remembers fire arrows that slowed them, but didn't stop them. He remembers riding south with 60 others while the rest were left behind in the dark, and not looking back, because looking back would have broken something in him. He needed to keep whole. 44 made it to Craster's Keep. That is the number. 44 out of 300. He hears the Lord Commander before he sees him. Mormont moves through the dark, the way old bears move, heavy, deliberate, with no particular concern for what might hear him coming. He is 69 years old, and large, grey-bearded, the kind of man who takes up more space than his body requires. He finds Jon at the door and looks at him for a moment without speaking. "Walk with me," Mormont says. It is not a request. They go to the far end of the keep, away from the sleeping men, to a corner where Craster stores his grain, or what is left of it. The old wildling has made his feelings about guests perfectly clear for 3 days now. Jon has been watching Dirk and Ollo Lofhund, watching Craster, and he does not like what he sees in their eyes. Something is going to happen. He has felt it, building the way you feel a storm behind your teeth before the sky breaks open. Mormont sits on a grain sack with the ease of a man who has long since stopped caring where the furniture is beneath him. Jon stands. For a moment, the old bear says nothing. He turns something over in his hands. A letter, folded and sealed, the wax dark and cracked from being carried too long in a coat. He looks at it, the way men look at things they are about to do something irreversible with. "I'm going to tell you something," Mormont says. "And when I'm done, you are not going to say anything for a little while. You're going to let it settle. Then we'll talk." Jon says nothing, which seems to be the right answer. Mormont holds the letter out. Jon takes it. The seal is already broken. He can see where Mormont has pressed it back together 12 times, and it no longer really holds. The handwriting inside is old and careful, the letters formed with the particular precision of a man whose hands have long since begun to shake, but who refuses to let that stop him. Jon reads it. He reads it again. The letter is from Maester Aemon. It begins without preamble, the way old men write when they have run out of patience for soft approaches. It says that Aemon has kept a secret for 16 years at the request of a man he respected. It says that man is dead now, killed in King's Landing on the order of a boy king, and the secret died with him, in the sense that no one is any longer maintaining it. It says that when Aemon is gone, which will not be long now, the secret will simply cease to exist, and a thing that should be known will instead be lost. It says that Eddard Stark of Winterfell went to the Tower of Joy in the Red Mountains of Dawn in the year 283, at the end of Robert's rebellion. It says he went to find his sister, Lyanna. It says he found her dying in a room that smelled of blood and roses. It says he left that tower with an infant boy. It says the boy's father was Rhaegar Targaryen, Prince of Dragonstone, who had annulled his marriage to Elia Martell and wed Lyanna Stark in a secret ceremony in Dorne. It says the boy's name, his true name, the name his mother gave him, with what little breath she had left, was Aegon Targaryen. It says Jon Snow is that boy. Aemon writes that he has watched Jon for nearly 2 years. He writes that he saw it long before he was willing to admit he saw it. The way Jon carries himself, the particular grey of his eyes, the long, stark jaw on a face that is otherwise not quite fully Stark. Ned Stark's children all took after their Tully mother, Aemon writes. All of them except Jon. And Jon does not look like Ned. Jon looks like a Stark, the way a river looks like the sea. The same water, not the same thing. He writes, I am sending this to you because I believe you will do what Ned Stark would have done. Protect him, and send him somewhere a Lord Commander cannot. Jon reads it a 3rd time. Then he folds it and holds it and looks at the wall. He is aware that his hands are very still. He notices this the way you notice strange things in moments when the ground has just moved under you, with a kind of detached precision, cataloguing details because the large thing is too large to look at directly. When did you get this? Jon asks. A raven found us 2 days before the fist. Jon absorbs that. Mormont has been carrying this for weeks, then, has been looking at him across fires and over maps with this folded in his coat. Jon thinks about all the moments he stood at Mormont's shoulder, pointing at positions on vellum, and wonders what the old bear was thinking. You believe it? Jon says. I do. Why? Mormont is quiet for a moment. Then he says, because Aemon Targaryen is 118 years old and has never lied to me. Because I have watched you since the night you saved my life from that wight, and I have wondered things I didn't let myself wonder. Because you have the look of the Starks and something else underneath it that I couldn't name. He pauses. And because Ned Stark never told anyone who your mother was. In 20 years of knowing him. Not once. Men don't keep secrets like that about bastards. They keep secrets like that about kings' sons. The fire pops in the other room. Someone in the dark turns over in his sleep. The night is very cold and very still, and outside the walls the haunted forest does what haunted forests do. It breathes and watches and says nothing. Jon looks down at Longclaw, the white stone direwolf, the sword Mormont had reforged for him, the bear replaced with the wolf because Mormont looked at Jon and saw a Stark worth honoring. He thinks about Ned, his father, the man he called his father, who took a secret to the executioner's block and would not give it up even at the end. Even when giving it up might have saved him. Even when it cost him everything. Jon thinks. He kept it to protect me. And then he thinks the thought after that, the one he has been running from since he first read Aemon's letter. Ned Stark was not my father. It sits in him like a blade. Rhaegar Targaryen, Jon says. Aye. He died at the Trident. He did. I never met him. No. A long silence. John is 16 years old, and he is sitting in a rotting grain store beyond the wall with 43 exhausted men sleeping 20 feet away, and the most dangerous secret in Westeros folded in his hand. He thinks he ought to feel something enormous. He feels instead very cold, and very awake, and very alone in a way that has nothing to do with the haunted forest. "There are men here," John says carefully, "who are going to do something before morning. I know. You may not survive it." Mormont looks at him with the calm of a man who has had 3 weeks to make his peace with something. "That's why we're having this conversation tonight." He produces the second letter then. New vellum, freshly sealed, Mormont's own blunt hand on the outside. The name on the seal reads, Robb Stark, King in the North. "You're going to ride south," Mormont says. "You're going to find your brother's army, find Robb, no one else first, and give him this letter. What's in it is what Eamon wrote to me. Robb needs to know what his brother truly is." John begins to object. Mormont raises one large hand. "You are not running," Mormont says. "I am sending you. There is a difference, and you are going to hold on to that difference with both hands, because it is the only thing that keeps this from being desertion." He pauses. "I sent you to King's Landing. I sent you to the Fist. I am sending you south. Those are orders, and you will follow them." John looks at him. "And what about you? That's not your concern." "It is." Mormont is quiet for a moment. Then quietly, "I've had a good run." It is not self-pity. It is not bravery either, exactly. It is the straightforward accounting of a man who spent his whole life doing what needed doing, and has no particular complaints about how it ends. John has served this man for nearly 2 years. He knows the difference between performance and truth in Mormont's voice. And this is truth. John stands. He does not know what to say, so he says the thing that is actually true. "You were a good Lord Commander." Mormont grunts. "I was a stubborn one. Whether that's the same thing is for better men than me to decide." He looks at John for a moment, takes him in the way you take in a thing you are not going to see again. Then he does something John does not expect. He reaches out and puts his hand on the hilt of Longclaw. He does not take it. He just rests his hand there for a moment, the sword he carried for years, the sword he gave away because he saw something in a bastard boy worth the gift. "I gave you this because you saved my life," Mormont says. "You saved my life because that's the kind of man you are. I want you to keep being that kind of man, whatever they call you while you're doing it." He takes his hand away. "Before first light," he says. "Go." John takes the sealed letter for Robb and tucks it inside his cloak, alongside Aemon's. He picks up Longclaw and holds it at his side. He looks at the old bear one last time, the large, grey-bearded man sitting on a grain sack in the dark, 69 years old, unafraid. And then he goes to gather what little he has. He does not say goodbye. Mormont does not want goodbyes. He knows this about the man. The fire is down to coals. The brothers sleep. John moves through the dark without waking them, stepping over legs and around saddlebags, and the whole time he keeps his eyes straight ahead, and he does not let himself think yet about what he is carrying or what it means. There will be time for that later. If there is a later. For now there is only the door and the dark beyond it, and the wall somewhere to the south waiting for him to cross back through. He goes. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Chapter 2. Before Dawn. The haunted forest at this hour is a thing of absolute dark. No moon. The trees close overhead like a held breath, and the cold is the kind that settles into the joints and stays there. The kind that makes a man believe winter is not a season, but a permanent condition of the world beyond the wall. John moves south by the stars where he can see them through the canopy. Where he cannot, he moves by the feel of the ground beneath his boots, the slight downward grade that pulls toward the wall, the way the forest thins in the direction of men and fire and the world he came from. He carries nothing but his cloak, the 2 letters pressed against his chest, and Longclaw at his belt. The white stone direwolf is invisible in the dark. He keeps his hand on the hilt anyway. He passed Sam on the way out. Sam was awake. Sam is often awake in the small hours, unable to sleep, sitting with his back against whatever wall is nearest and staring at nothing in particular. John had come through the dark, and Sam had looked up and seen him, seen the cloak gathered for travel and the sword already belted, and the expression on John's face that was not quite calm, and not quite the opposite of calm. Sam had opened his mouth. John shook his head once. Sam closed his mouth. They looked at each other for a moment in the dark of the keep, 2 boys from the same training cohort who had become something neither of them had expected, and then John moved past him toward the door. He did not look back. He could feel Sam watching him go, the way Sam watches things, with that particular quality of attention that looks like fear, and is actually something considerably braver than fear. John does not know what Sam will do when morning comes. He does not know what any of them will do. He knows what Mormont expects Sam to do, because Mormont told him once, in an indirect way, the way the old bear tells most things, that if it all went wrong beyond the wall, Sam Tarley was the one he trusted to carry a message back. John thought at the time that was a strange thing to trust a coward with. He thinks now that Mormont understood something about Sam that the rest of them had been too busy calling him a coward to notice. He keeps walking. The wall is somewhere to the south. He does not know exactly how far. The ranging moved north and east from Castle Black into the deep haunted forest, where the distances are not reliable, and the cold plays tricks with a man's sense of how long he has been walking. He thinks it is 2 days on foot, perhaps 3. He has no horse. The horses that survived the fist were kept at Craster's Keep, and he did not take one. Taking a horse would have meant noise, and noise would have meant waking brothers, and waking brothers would have meant questions he could not answer with the truth and did not want to answer with a lie. So he walks. He thinks about Rhaegar Targaryen. He has been trying not to think about Rhaegar Targaryen since the moment he read Aemon's letter, which means he has been thinking about almost nothing else. He knows the story. Everyone in the 7 Kingdoms knows the story, or the version of the story that Robert Baratheon's reign made official. Rhaegar abducted Lyanna Stark. Robert Baratheon fought a war to get her back. Rhaegar died at the Trident with rubies flying from his armor into the water. Lyanna died in a tower in Dorne shortly after. That is the story everyone knows. The other story, the one in Aemon's letter, the one John is carrying pressed to his chest, is that Rhaegar did not abduct Lyanna, that they were wed in secret, that the tower was not a prison, that Lyanna went willingly into it, and what she left in it when she died was a son. John turns that over as he walks. He turns it over and looks at the underside of it, and then he turns it back because the underside is not a place he is ready to stay for long yet. What he keeps returning to instead is Ned. Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, who took a secret to King's Landing, and to the Sept of Baelor, and to a headsman's blade, and never once gave it up. Who looked at his king, his oldest friend, the man he'd fought a war beside, and said nothing. Who lived with a lie for 16 years, because the truth would have gotten his sister's child killed. Jon has spent his whole life wondering why Ned Stark claimed him, has spent his whole life with the shape of that question sitting in him like a splinter, not painful enough to demand attention, never going away. He thought it was honor. He thought it was Ned being Ned, taking responsibility for something he could not leave behind. It was love. It was the last thing Lyanna asked of him, and Ned Stark was a man who kept his promises. Jon stops walking for a moment. Just a moment. He stands in the dark forest and breathes the cold air and lets it be what it is, enormous and strange and not yet fully real, and then he keeps moving south. Behind him, a long way back now through the trees, the sky begins to lighten. Not much, just the first grey suggestion of dawn creeping up from behind the world. He does not know it yet. He will not know it for days. But behind him, in Craster's Keep, the morning is beginning. It starts with Dirk. It starts, more precisely, with Craster, who has spent 3 days making his low opinion of Night's Watch guests perfectly clear, and who chooses this particular morning to make it clear one final time in a way that requires a response. He takes bread from a man who is already starving. He says something about black crows and their uselessness. He is not wrong about the uselessness, which is perhaps why the words land the way they do. Dirk does not plan what happens next. Or he does. He has been planning something for weeks, since before the fist, since the nights when Chet was still alive and muttering in corners. But in the moment, it does not feel like a plan. It feels like a man reaching his limit, which is a feeling that has been building in this keep like steam in a sealed pot. Sam watches it happen from his corner. He watches with the expression he gets when he is trying to become very small and very still and take up as little space as possible in the world, which is an instinct he developed under his father's roof and which has saved him more than once. It goes badly fast. Craster goes down. The keep erupts, brothers on their feet, voices rising, sides forming, the way sides always form in moments like this, not from principle but from proximity, from who you were standing next to when it started. Some men grab for weapons. Some men try to stop it. Most men are simply trying to understand what is happening before it finishes happening. And then Mormont comes through it all. He is 69 years old, and he moves through the chaos the way he has always moved through everything, like a force that has decided to go somewhere and finds the concept of obstacles largely irrelevant. He is large. He is angry. He finds Dirk. "Put it down," Mormont says. He says it the way Lord Commanders say things, not as a question, not as a plea, as a fact that has not yet caught up with the present moment, but will. Garth of Greenaway grabs him from behind. Sam sees it. Sam opens his mouth. Ollo Lofand drives a blade into Mormont's belly. It is a single motion, unhurried, the kind of thing that looks almost accidental until you understand what you are seeing. Mormont goes still. Not down. He doesn't go down yet, because he is Jeor Mormont, and he has not yet given himself permission to fall. But still, with one hand moving toward the wound, with the reflexive disbelief of a man whose body has just done something his mind hasn't authorized. The keep goes loud and then, in a strange way, goes quiet. Mormont looks at Ollo Lofand. He looks at the blade. He looks at the chaos around him, with an expression that is not quite pain and not quite fury, but something that contains both, distilled down to something colder and more considered than either. He does not fall for a long time. Sam is at his side before anyone else thinks to be. Sam, who everyone calls a coward, who wept the first night at Castle Black and begged to go home, who the other brothers have spent a year mocking. Sam is at Mormont's side with both hands pressed against the wound and his face gone white and his eyes very bright. "Maester," Sam says. "We need no maester here," Mormont says. His voice is still steady. This is the most frightening thing Sam has ever heard. "Sam!" "My lord." "Listen to me." Mormont's hand finds Sam's arm, grip still strong, the grip of a large man who spent his whole life at the wall. "Get to Castle Black, whatever it takes. Tell them what happened here. Tell them what's coming. The whites, the others, all of it. They need to hear it from someone they'll believe." Sam wants to say he doesn't know if anyone will believe him. He wants to say he is afraid. He says neither, because Mormont is looking at him with the expression of a man who has made a decision about Sam Tarley and is not interested in Sam's opinion of it. "My son," Mormont says then, quieter, the words costing him something. "Jorah, tell him to come home. Tell him to take the black." A pause. "Tell him his father said." Sam nods. He cannot speak. Mormont's grip on his arm loosens. It does not release all at once. It goes the way strength goes when it is no longer maintained, gradually and then completely. The old bear closes his eyes. He dies thinking about the boy he sent south in the dark. He does not say this. There is no one to say it to, and besides, some things are not for saying aloud. He thinks, "I hope he's far enough." He thinks, "I hope it's enough." He thinks nothing after that. John does not hear it. John is in the forest, moving south, and the trees are between him and everything that happens behind him, and the cold carries sound in strange ways beyond the wall, but not that far, and not through that much wood, and not over the noise of his own breathing and his own footsteps, and the thoughts he is still turning over in his mind like stones at the bottom of a river. He stops once at the top of a low ridge and looks back north. The forest. Dark. Silent. He cannot see Craster's Keep from here. He cannot see anything but trees and the blue-grey nothing of the pre-dawn sky pressing down through the canopy. There is nothing to see. He stands there for a moment anyway. Then he turns south and keeps walking. The wall is ahead of him somewhere in the dark. 700 feet of ice and old magic, and everything that has ever stood between the realm of men and what lives beyond it. On the other side of it is a world at war over a throne that does not know what is coming. He carries a secret that could end that war, or start a new one, or both. He carries a sword with a direwolf's head. He carries the last thing the old bear ever gave him, which is an order, and which he intends to follow. He walks south. Chapter 3. The Old Man at the Gate. He walks for 2 days. The first day is forest, the deep, wrong, quiet kind that exists only north of the wall, where the trees grow too close, and the undergrowth is too still, and the light, when it comes, falls at angles that make the shadows point the wrong direction. John moves south, and does not stop except to drink from a stream he finds on the second morning, cold enough to make his teeth ache. He eats nothing. There is nothing to eat. The second day the forest begins to thin. The trees spread apart the way trees do when they can feel the wall nearby, as if even the haunted forest respects the boundary, keeps its distance from 700 feet of ice and old magic. John crests a low ridge in the early afternoon, and there it is. He has seen the wall before. He lived at its base for nearly 2 years. But you do not grow accustomed to it the way you grow accustomed to other large things. It is not like a mountain, which the eye eventually accepts and files away. The wall refuses to be accepted. It stands there in the pale winter light and insists on being looked at directly. And what it says when you look at it directly is, everything you know about the size of things is wrong. 700 feet of ice. The sun hits it, and the ice throws the light back, blue-white, cold fire. It runs east and west until it vanishes into distance in both directions, and John stands at the tree line, looking up at it with Longclaw at his belt, and 2 letters pressed against his chest and 2 days of cold in his bones. The gate is at Castle Black. He walks. The brothers at the gate do not know what to make of him. He is alone, which is wrong. He comes from the north, which is wrong. He is wearing a Night's Watch cloak that has seen hard use, and he is carrying a sword that one of them squints at for a long moment before looking away, and his face has something in it that makes the questions die before they reach their mouths. "John Snow," he says, "steward to the Lord Commander, open the gate." They open the gate. He passes through the wall into the world south of it, and stands for a moment in the tunnel's darkness, listening to the ice creak around him with the slow voice of something immeasurably old. Then he comes out the other side into Castle Black's yard and breathes air that tastes comparatively like spring. The castle is undermanned, and he can feel it the way you feel an empty house, the particular quality of silence that comes not from quiet, but from absence. There are brothers moving in the yard, going about what business there is to go about, and they look at him with the careful eyes of men who have been waiting for bad news and are trying to determine whether he is it. He does not stop to explain himself. He goes to Meister Aemon's cell. The door is open. It is always open. John has never seen it closed. Aemon is in his chair by the small hearth, wrapped in furs the way he is always wrapped in furs, which is to say completely, as if his body has decided the war against the cold is no longer worth fighting, and has simply surrendered to as many layers as can be piled upon it. He is small under all of it. He was never a large man. John has gathered this from things said around him, rather than from any direct account. But age has reduced him the way age reduces very old things, worn them down to their essential shape. And Aemon's essential shape is a man sitting very still in a chair, with his hands folded in his lap, and his clouded eyes pointed at nothing visible in this world. He hears John come in. John has not made any particular noise, but Aemon turns his head toward the door a full 3 seconds before John crosses the threshold. "John Snow," the old man says. "Meister." John pulls a stool close and sits. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The fire is small but steady. Outside, somewhere in the yard, 2 men are arguing about something in low voices that carry the specific, exhausted tone of men who have been arguing the same thing for 3 days. John produces Aemon's letter and sets it on the table between them. The old man does not look at it, cannot look at it, his eyes long past the work of reading. But his hand moves toward it and touches the folded edge with 2 fingers, the way a blind man reads a familiar object. "He gave it to you," Aemon says, "before the mutiny." A pause. "He is dead then?" "I don't know," John says. "I left before dawn, but yes, I think so." Aemon takes his hand from the letter and folds both hands back in his lap. His face does not change. He's had 118 years to practice not letting his face change, and by now he is very good at it. But there is something in the set of his mouth, a tightening, there and then gone, that tells John what the old man will not say. "Tell me about my father," John says. The word comes out strange. He has used it before, thousands of times, always meaning Ned. It means someone else now, and his mouth has not yet learned the difference. He hears it land wrong, and does not correct it. Aemon is quiet for a long moment. Then he begins. He tells John about Rhaegar, the way only a great-great-uncle can. Not as history, not as legend, but as a boy he knew, a young man he watched grow. He says Rhaegar had silver-gold hair and violet eyes, and was considered the finest-looking man of his generation, which Aemon says with the mild tone of someone reporting a fact they find neither impressive nor relevant. He says Rhaegar played the harp with extraordinary skill, and that music was the first language he used to understand the world, before swords, before politics, before prophecy. He pauses on that last word. He believed he was the prince that was promised, Aemon says, or that one of his children would be. He was not the first Targaryen to believe such a thing, and the belief did not make him Maud. It made him purposeful, which in some ways is more dangerous. He tilts his head slightly. I do not know how much of what he did was prophecy, and how much was love. Perhaps he did not know either. John thinks about a tower in the Red Mountains, a room that smelled of blood and roses, a woman who went willingly. What was she like? He says. Lyanna. Aemon shakes his head slowly. I never met her. I know only what others told me, and what others told me was that she was a Stark in the old mould, fierce and proud and not inclined to do what she was told unless she agreed with the reason. He almost smiles. By all accounts, she and Rhaegar were well matched in stubbornness, if nothing else. John looks at his hands. He is thinking about his grey eyes, which are the eyes of every Stark he has ever met, including Arya, who everyone says looks most like him. He is thinking about the long face, the dark hair. He looks like a Stark. He is a Stark in every way that matters to the person he has been for 16 years, and he is something else now, underneath it, like a second shadow. Why did you never tell me? John says. It is not quite an accusation. It is the question underneath the accusation, the one that matters more. Because Ned Stark asked me not to, Aemon says. Because he asked me with the particular tone of a man who has just come from watching his sister die, and I was not inclined to refuse him. And because, he pauses, and something old and tired moves across his face. Because Robert Baratheon was king, and Robert Baratheon hated Targaryens with the specific hatred of a man who has lost something he loves and needs somewhere to put the blame. He folds his hands tighter. A Targaryen boy at the Wall was safe. A Targaryen boy anywhere else was a corpse. Robert is dead. Robert is dead. And now there are 5 kings fighting over what he left behind, and every one of them has a reason to want what you are either controlled or ended. Aemon turns his clouded eyes toward John with the precision of a man who does not need sight to look at something directly, which is why Mormont sent you south. Not to make a claim, to make sure the knowledge survives in hands that can do something with it. John is quiet for a moment. Robb's hands, he says. Robb's hands, Aemon agrees. John reaches into his cloak and produces the second letter. Mormont's letter, sealed for Robb Stark, king in the north. He holds it, but does not offer it. It is not for Aemon. Aemon knows this, and makes no move toward it. "When I get there," Jon says, "when I give him this, what does he do with it?" "That," Aemon says, "is between you and your brother. I have spent 16 years deciding what to do with this secret, and I have concluded that deciding is a young man's work. I am 118 years old, Jon. I am long past young men's work." Jon almost smiles at that. Almost. He stands. He puts Mormont's letter back inside his cloak, next to Aemon's, next to his chest, where the cold cannot quite reach. He picks up Longclaw from where he rested it against the wall and holds it at his side and looks at the old man in the chair. Aemon reaches out without being asked and wraps both hands around the sword's blade. Careful, gentle, the way you handle something you know is sharp, but need to touch regardless. He holds it for a moment. His face is very still. "I knew your grandfather," Aemon says quietly. "I knew your father's grandfather. I have watched your family, both your families, for longer than most men live." He releases the blade and lowers his hands. "Go. You carry something more important than a sword." Jon goes. He takes a horse from the stable, a good one, a rangy grey with a steady eye that does not seem troubled by the cold or by the stranger saddling her in the near dark. He takes provisions from the steward's stores without ceremony, enough for a hard ride south. He does not tell anyone where he is going or why. The acting garrison is afraid enough without adding to it. He leads the grey out through the yard and mounts at the gate. The wall is behind him, and the haunted forest is behind the wall, and somewhere back in that forest, Mormont's body is cooling in a keep that Jon will probably never see again. He sits the horse for a moment at the gate and breathes the cold air. He has spent 2 years at this castle. He has trained here and learned here and nearly deserted from here once, in the black weeks after his father's execution, when the grief was fresh enough that the oath felt like a cage. Mormont pardoned him for that. Mormont looked at a boy trying to run toward a war and said, "I know, and I need you here." And that was enough then. He thinks about what Mormont said last night. "You are not running. I am sending you." There is a difference. Jon holds on to that difference as he rides south into the King's Road. The wall shrinks behind him. Then it disappears. Then there is only the road and the winter light and the long, empty north stretching out ahead. And somewhere at the far end of it, a war. And somewhere in that war, his brother, and in his brother's hands, soon, a letter that will change everything. He rides. Chapter 4. The King's Road. The King's Road in winter is a grey ribbon through a grey world. Jon rides south, and the north opens around him the way the north always does, enormous and cold and indifferent to the small, warm thing moving through it. The road is packed earth and old stone, the kind of road that has been here since before anyone alive can remember, and it goes south with the quiet authority of something that has always known where it was going, even when the men riding it did not. He pushes the grey mare hard the first day, and she goes willingly, a good animal with a long stride that eats the miles without complaint. By midday the wall is out of sight behind him. By nightfall he has passed through 3 villages and found 2 of them empty. Not burned. Not destroyed. Simply empty, the way a place goes empty when everyone in it has decided somewhere else is safer. Doors left open, a cook fire gone cold, a child's boot in the mud outside one threshold, single, no mate visible anywhere. Jon rides past without stopping. He has seen empty villages before, during his ranging, but those were north of the wall, and the emptiness had a different quality to it. Older, final, beyond the reach of explanation. These are fresh abandonments. People who left yesterday or last week, taking what they could carry and leaving the rest. The war is a long way south, but news of a war travels faster than armies, and the North has been bleeding bannermen to Robb Stark's campaign for a year now. What is left behind is women and old men and children making calculations about risk that they should not have to make. Jon rides. On the second day, the road begins to carry more traffic. Not soldiers, not yet, but the kind of movement that follows soldiers the way crows follow a march. A family with a cart piled with bundled cloth and a goat roped to the back. An old man walking alone with a pack that bows his shoulders. 3 women moving north together with the particular swift stride of people who are afraid but trying not to look it. He hears it from one of them. He pulls the grey up alongside and asks, as casually as a man in a Night's Watch cloak asking questions on the King's Road can ask, "What news from the south?" The woman who answers him is perhaps 40, with the hard, practical face of someone who has been receiving bad news with composure for most of her adult life. She looks at his cloak. She looks at the sword at his belt, the dire wolf pommel, the Valyrian steel that catches the flat winter light differently from ordinary steel. "Winterfell's taken," she says. "Ironborn. Lord Stark's bastard, and the little ones are dead, some say." Jon keeps his face still. He has had practice at keeping his face still this week. "Some say," he says. "Some say," she agrees, in the tone of a woman who has learned not to believe everything she hears, and not to disbelieve it either. She looks at him again, at the sword, at his face, at whatever she finds there, and then she walks on without asking any more questions. The other 2 women follow without looking back. Jon sits the horse for a moment in the road. Bran. Rickon. He thinks about Bran, 7 years old when Jon last saw him, climbing the towers at Winterfell with the reckless ease of a boy who believed falling was something that happened to other people. He thinks about Rickon, who was 4 and too small to have a face Jon can fully remember, only the impression of a small, angry person who bit people when displeased. The woman said bastard. She meant him. She said Lord Stark's bastard, and the little ones are dead. He is not dead. He is sitting on a horse on the King's Road with 2 letters inside his cloak and orders to find his brother. But the news is out in the world that he is. The rumour of him is. And the rumour is wrong in every particular. He is not dead. He is not Ned Stark's bastard. He is not even who he thought he was 3 days ago. And none of that changes the fact that Bran and Rickon might be. He does not believe they are. He does not know why he does not believe it, only that Mormont's letter said, "Find Robb," and the urgency in that order has become the fixed point around which everything else orbits. He cannot stop for this. He cannot ride for Winterfell, which is taken, and find 2 small boys who may or may not be dead, and do anything useful about it if they are. He can ride south. He rides. Meanwhile, to the north, Sam Tarly reaches Castle Black on foot just before dark on the second day, having walked without stopping, except once, briefly, to sit against a tree and put his face in his hands for a few minutes before getting up and walking again. He comes through the gate looking like what he is, a fat boy who has been through something terrible and kept moving anyway, and the brothers at the gate look at him and ask where the others are, and Sam tells them, standing there in the yard with his hands shaking and his voice steadier than he expected it to be, that there are no others, that there was a mutiny at Craster's Keep, that the Lord Commander is dead. The yard goes quiet. Sam is taken to the acting castellan and tells it again. He tells it a third time to the officers who arrive one by one as word spreads through the undermanned castle like fire through dry wood. He is careful and precise in a way that surprises him. He does not know where the precision comes from, only that Mormont told him to do this, and he is doing it, and doing it properly seems like the least he can offer. He is brought to Meister Aemon last. The old man is in his chair, as he always is. He is wrapped in his furs, as he always is. He listens to Sam's account from beginning to end without speaking, his clouded eyes fixed on nothing, his hands still in his lap. When Sam finishes, there is a silence. "The Lord Commander," Aemon says. "Yes, Meister. He, at the end, he asked me to come here, to report. He said to tell his son, Jorah, he said, tell Jorah to come home and take the black." Another silence. Longer. "Yes," Aemon says. He would say that. Sam waits. He is not sure what he is waiting for. Some response to the scale of what he has reported, perhaps. 300 men gone, the great ranging broken, the others real and moving. The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch dead at a wildling's fire with a mutineer's blade in his belly. He is waiting for someone to tell him what any of this means. Aemon does not tell him. Aemon says, "You did well, Sam." That is all. Sam is taken away to be fed and given a bed. He does not ask about Jon. He remembers Jon leaving in the dark, and he does not know where Jon went or why, and he has decided, with the particular stubborn loyalty of a frightened person who has learned to pick which fears to act on, that it is not his story to tell. Jon went somewhere. Jon had a reason. That is enough. Meister Aemon sits alone in his cell with his hands in his lap and his clouded eyes pointed at the middle distance, and he says nothing to anyone about the boy who came through his door 2 days ago and rode south on a grey horse with a Valyrian steel sword and a secret that could undo a war. He says nothing and waits. Jon sleeps one night at a wayhouse south of the Neck, a low-ceilinged building that smells of old smoke and older straw, tended by a man who takes Jon's coin without comment and asks no questions. The other guests are a merchant and his 2 guards, who look at Jon's black cloak and then carefully look elsewhere, which is the usual response. Men in Night's Watch cloaks are not typically figures people want to interrogate about their business. He lies on a pallet with Longclaw alongside him, hilt to hand, the way he has slept since the fist. The 2 letters are still inside his cloak, which he does not remove. He is aware of them against his chest, the weight of them, which is not physical, which is something else entirely. The way certain objects carry more than their own mass. He does not dream. He wakes before the merchant's guards are stirring, saddles the grey in the dark, and is back on the road before the sky has done more than suggest the possibility of light. The Neck is behind him by midday. The land changes, flatter and then gradually less flat, the wide, empty northern spaces giving way to something denser, more worked, more scarred. He passes a mill with a burned roof. He passes a field that has been cut and not replanted, the furrows open to the sky. He passes a road junction where someone has left a pike with nothing on it, just the pike alone in the earth at the crossing, which could mean anything or nothing. The air begins to smell different. Smoke, but old smoke. The kind that has settled into the ground rather than still rising from it. And beneath that, turned earth and river mud, and the particular smell of a land that has had armies move through it recently, sweat and iron and horse, and the aftermath of men eating and sleeping and fighting in large numbers. The riverlands. Jon pulls the grey up at the top of a low rise and looks south. The land rolls out in front of him, brown and grey in the winter light, patched with bare woodland and open field. Somewhere down there, Robb Stark's army is moving, or has moved, or is preparing to move, the way armies are always doing one of those three things. Somewhere down there is his brother. Jon is 16 years old, and he has ridden for weeks through the cold and the empty, and the rumours and the weight of what he is carrying, and for the first time since Craster's Keep, he lets himself feel how tired he is. Not in his body, though that too, but something underneath the body's tiredness, the deeper kind that comes from carrying a thing too large for a single person to carry alone. He needs to put it down somewhere. He needs to put it down in Robb's hands, because those are the hands Mormont chose, and Mormont chose well, and Jon has to believe that right now because it is the thing that keeps him on the horse instead of stopped at the side of the road, trying to understand what any of it means. He rides down off the rise. Robb is somewhere south. The war is somewhere south. The answers, or what passes for answers in a world where the questions are this large, are somewhere south. Jon goes to find them. Chapter 5. The King in the North. Robb Stark's war camp wakes before the sun does. It is a practical necessity, and also by now a reflex, the kind of habit an army develops when it has been in the field long enough that the camp itself has become a kind of home, with its own routines and its own hierarchies and its own sounds that the men inside it have stopped consciously hearing. The fires at the perimeter, the horses shifting in their lines, the sentries changing, the cooks moving through the dark with quiet efficiency, because an army that has not eaten cannot fight, and this army has done a great deal of fighting and needs to keep eating to keep doing it. At the center of all this, in the largest tent, Robb Stark is already awake. He is 16 years old and he does not look it, or rather he does look 16, and also look something else at the same time, something harder and more considered than 16 usually manages. He has his mother's auburn hair and his mother's colouring, the Tully look that sits strangely on a boy who grew up under the grey skies of Winterfell, and he moves through his tent with the particular economy of someone who has spent the last year learning that every motion has a cost, and unnecessary ones compound. The war council is already assembled. Not all of them. Some of his lords are in the field, or riding, or managing their own encampments. But enough. Maege Mormont is there, because Maege Mormont is always there when there is anything worth being present for. She stands near the back of the tent in her patched ring-mail, short and stout and grey-haired, built low to the ground the way women are built who have spent their lives refusing to be knocked over by anything the world has thrown at them. She has a spiked mace at her hip and her arms crossed over her chest, and she is listening to the discussion of supply lines with the focused attention of someone who understands that wars are won and lost on logistics before they are won and lost on battlefields. Catelyn Stark is there too, standing near her son with the composed expression she wears in councils, the one that says she is taking everything in, filing it, making assessments that she will voice later when the right moment presents itself. She is 35, with the fine bones and auburn hair of House Tully, and she is afraid for her children in the constant low-grade way of a mother who has been receiving bad news for a year, and has learned to keep the fear somewhere it does not interfere with the thinking. Bran and Rickon are in Winterfell, which is taken. She does not know if they are alive. She turns this uncertainty over in her mind every morning and every night, and stores it away during the hours when she needs to be useful to her son and his war. The council is discussing the Westerlands campaign when the raven arrives. The Meister brings it himself, which tells Rob something before he reads a word. A Meister who brings a letter in person, rather than sending it by hand, is a Meister who has already read it and decided it requires a particular kind of care in the delivery. Rob takes the letter. He reads it. He reads it again. He looks up at the assembled lords. "Read it aloud," Mage Mormont says from the back of the tent. Her voice is flat and even, the voice of a woman who has decided she would rather know than not know, and is holding herself ready for either. Rob reads it aloud. The letter is from Castle Black. It is from the acting Castellan, reporting what a sworn brother named Samwell Tarley brought to the gate 2 days past. The Great Ranging, under the command of Lord Commander Gior Mormont, was attacked in the haunted forest. The night's watch was broken at a place called the Fist of the First Men by an army of the dead. Wights, animated corpses, attacking in the hundreds, immune to steel. The surviving brothers retreated to a wildling settlement called Craster's Keep. There was a mutiny. Rob pauses before the last part. He reads it anyway. The Lord Commander is dead, killed by his own men. The tent is quiet. Mage Mormont, at the back of the tent, does not move. She is standing with her arms still crossed and her eyes fixed somewhere past the top of the central tent pole at a point in the middle distance that has nothing in it. Her face is the face she wears in battle, closed, waiting, the expression of a woman who is processing information before deciding what to do with it. "Read it again," she says. Her voice is the same as before, flat, even, the same voice she used the first time. Rob reads it again. When he finishes the second reading, the tent is quiet in a different way. The first silence was shock. This one is something that has moved past shock into the territory of what comes after, which is harder and colder and more serious. "My lords," Rob says, "give us the room." They file out. They are soldiers and vassals, and they recognize a dismissal, and more than that, they recognize a man who has just been handed grief along with intelligence and needs a moment to separate the two. They go without protest or comment, with the quiet dignity of men who have learned that their king's private moments are not their business. Mage does not move. Rob does not ask her to. She is his bannerman, and she has just heard that her brother is dead, and asking her to leave would be a discourtesy so profound it would undo a year's worth of the careful respect he has worked to show her. He is 16. Not a fool. The three of them stand in the tent, Rob, Catelyn, Mage, and the silence runs out to its natural end. "He was a good man," Mage says. That is all she says. She says it the way she says most things, straight, without decoration, the words carrying exactly what they need to carry, and nothing extra. She unfolds her arms. She looks at the ground for a moment, which is the only concession she makes. Then she looks up. "Wights," she says. "The dead walking." That's what the letter says. Gior believed it. He wouldn't have taken 300 men beyond the wall for something he didn't believe. She says this not to Rob and not to Catelyn, but to the space between them, to the air, as if she is confirming it for her own record. He was right then. She walks to the tent entrance and stops there with the flap in her hand, her back to them, looking out at the camp coming to life in the grey morning. "If you send aid to the wall," she says, "send it quickly. Whatever is up there does not wait on councils." She pauses. "And whoever they send to replace him, they won't replace him." She lets the tent flap fall behind her. Catelyn watches her go. Rob and Catelyn stand alone in the tent, with the letter on the table between them. Rob is looking at it. Catelyn is looking at her son, which is where she looks when she is deciding whether to say something or let it settle first. She decides to say it. "The Night's Watch is broken," she says. "The Lord Commander is dead. The North has given most of its men to your war." She pauses. "The wall is undermanned, and the things that killed those men are still out there. I know. That is not a small problem. I know, Mother." She moves to the table. She straightens the letter without reading it again. An automatic gesture, the hands needing something to do while the mind works. We need to think about what this means for the Northern Lords, for the men who are here, in this camp, whose families are behind a wall that may not hold. She looks at him. We need to think about whether you can hold an army together when they learn their homes are unprotected. Rob nods. He is thinking about it. She can see him thinking about it. The particular stillness he gets when he is doing serious work behind his eyes, weighing options and costs with the methodical thoroughness she used to see in his father. She thinks about Ned, briefly, which she tries not to do in councils because it is not useful. She does it anyway. "There is also," she says carefully, "the matter of—" "Not tonight," Rob says. She looks at him. "John," she says. It comes out more neutral than she intends. It is the name she has never fully managed to say, without some quality underneath it that she cannot entirely control. The particular flatness of a name you have been working very hard not to associate with anything for 16 years. "He was at the wall. He was on this ranging, presumably. If the ranging was broken, I said not tonight." Rob's voice is not unkind. It is the voice he uses when he has made a decision and is not interested in reconsidering it in the next 10 minutes. He looks at her with his father's eyes in his mother's face, which is the combination she finds most difficult to argue with. We don't know what happened to John. The letter doesn't mention him. That could mean anything. It could mean he is dead. They both know this without saying it. "In the morning," Rob says. "We'll think about all of it in the morning." Catelyn nods. She picks up the letter and folds it and sets it near the corner of the table where the papers that require later attention go. It is a habit from Winterfell, organizing the urgent from the important, and she performs it here without thinking, in a tent in the Riverlands, because some habits outlast the places where you learned them. She is almost to the tent entrance when the commotion starts at the camp's edge. It is not the commotion of a threat, it is the specific commotion of outriders who have found something unexpected and are not sure what to do with it. Raised voices, a horse being brought to a stop, the sound of men conferring in urgent low tones that travel further than they intend. One of Rob's men comes to the tent entrance. He looks at Rob with the expression of a soldier reporting something he cannot quite categorize. "My Lord King," he says, "rider at the outer perimeter, alone, coming from the north." He pauses. He's wearing a Night's Watch cloak. Rob goes still. "He's got a sword," the man continues, with the particular care of someone describing something he knows is significant but cannot fully explain. "Black grip, white stone pommel, carved like a wolf's head." He pauses again. The outriders didn't know what to do with him, so they brought him in. Rob looks at his mother. Catelyn's face has gone through several things in rapid succession that she does not allow to reach their conclusions. She looks at Rob with a controlled expression that contains, underneath it, something that might be relief and might be the beginning of a much more complicated feeling that she has not yet had time to name. "Bring him," Rob says. His voice is steady. His hands are still. He is 16 years old, and he is already very good at not showing what he feels when the tent has people in it. He waits. Chapter 6. Brothers. They bring him through the camp at the kind of hour when fires are being built up rather than burning down. The morning still grey and cold. The men around those fires watching the black-cloaked rider pass with the particular attention soldiers give to anything that disrupts the pattern of a day. John rides the grey mare through the camp at a walk, because that is what you do when you are one man surrounded by an army, and you want everyone to understand clearly that you are not a threat. He keeps his hands visible. He keeps his eyes forward. He is aware of the watching, the way he is always aware of being looked at in spaces full of men who have been in the field long enough to be suspicious of strangers, which is every army, always, without exception. The tent is at the center of the camp, which he could have found without being led by the two outriders flanking him, because the center of every camp is where the largest tent is, and the largest tent is where the king is. He has spent enough time in Mormont's service to understand the geography of command. He dismounts at the entrance. The outriders take his horse. He goes in. Rob is standing at the table. He has grown. John's first thought, before anything else, is simply that. Rob has grown in the way that boys do between 15 and 16 when the growing comes fast, and the body hasn't quite finished deciding what shape it is settling into. He is taller than John remembers, and broader through the shoulders, and he is wearing armor that has seen use, not the polished display armor of a boy playing at war, but the dented, repaired, honest armor of a young man who has been fighting in it for a war. He has his mother's auburn hair and his mother's coloring, and, right now, his father's expression, the careful, measuring stillness that Ned Stark used in rooms where something important was about to happen. For a moment, they simply look at each other across the tent. John is aware that he looks worse than Rob does. He has been riding for weeks through the winter north, sleeping in wayhouses, and once in a barn, and once against a tree. And before that, he was beyond the wall at a mutinous wildling's keep after watching a battle against the dead. His cloak is travel-stained. His face has the particular quality of someone who has been very cold for a very long time, and has stopped noticing it. He is carrying a sword with a white stone direwolf on the pommel and 2 letters inside his cloak, and a secret that he has not yet decided how to carry, only that he must. Rob crosses the tent in 3 strides and puts both arms around him. John goes still for exactly 1 second, and then he grabs his brother by the back of his dented armor and holds on, and for a moment he is not carrying anything except the fact of being here, in the Riverlands, with his brother's arms around him, alive. Something in his chest unclenches that he did not know had been clenched. They step back. They look at each other with the slightly abashed expression of young men who have just done something they feel deeply, but are not sure how to talk about. Rob has the beginning of a smile that is working very hard to be composed and kingly and mostly succeeding. John thinks he probably looks the same. "You look terrible," Rob says. "You look like a king." Same thing, most days. They are brothers again, just for a moment, just for that exchange, that particular frequency that only brothers can find, built out of years of shared mornings at Winterfell and shared training yards and the specific shorthand of 2 people who grew up side by side and learned to speak in half sentences because the other one always knows the rest. Then the moment passes, because it has to, because they are not at Winterfell, and there are things that need to be said. The tent entrance opens. Catelyn comes in. She stops just inside the entrance and looks at John with the expression she has always used for him. Controlled, composed, the face she wears when she is working very hard not to let what she feels reach the surface. It is not hatred. It never really was hatred. Or if it was the second-hand kind, the kind you feel for a symbol rather than a person. And John has understood for a long time that he was a symbol to Catelyn Stark long before he was anything else. The symbol of a thing her husband did that she could not ask him to account for, and could not forgive him for, and could not unfeel, all at once. She says his name. "John." "My lady," he says. They look at each other for a moment. Then Catelyn moves to stand near Robb, which is where she always stands in rooms with people she is uncertain about, and she folds her hands in front of her and waits with the patience of a woman who has learned that waiting is usually more productive than speaking first. John tells them what happened. He tells it the same way he told it to the gate guards and the acting castellan at Castle Black, precisely in order, without embellishment. The great ranging, the fist of the first men, the attack, the whites, the others, the fire arrows that slowed them, and the retreat that saved 60 out of 300. The days at Craster's Keep with the survivors, broken and starving, and angry in the way that men get angry when the fear has been going on long enough that they need somewhere to put it. He does not say everything. He says, "There was a mutiny." He says, "Mormont is dead, I believe. I was not there when it happened. But I believe it." He says this carefully, which is the only way he knows how to say things about Mormont right now, because Mormont is 3 days dead, and the weight of it has not yet landed on John in the full way it is going to land, and until it does, he handles the subject with care. Catelyn's face during all of this is the composed face. She is listening and cataloguing and making the assessments she always makes, and John watches her do it and respects it, even as it makes him uneasy in the old way. Robb asks questions, practical ones, the questions of a commander, numbers, geography, what the others looked like, and how they moved, whether fire was the only defense that worked. John answers them. It is an odd thing, being asked military questions about the dead, rising by a 16-year-old king who looks like his mother and sounds like his father. But Robb listens with the quality of attention that makes John think. He's going to be very good at this, if he lives long enough. When John finishes, Catelyn speaks. "You left the watch," she says. Not an accusation, a statement requiring explanation. "I was sent," John says, "by a man who is dead. By a man who was alive when he sent me. He gave me orders. I'm following them." She looks at him with the measuring expression. And those orders were. John reaches inside his cloak and produces the sealed letter. Mormont's hand on the outside, the wax pressed and repressed a dozen times during the journey south, still holding. He sets it on the table between them, between Robb and Catelyn and himself, and he puts his hand flat on top of it for a moment, not pressing, just resting there. "For your eyes," he says. He is looking at Robb. Alone. Catelyn's intake of breath is very slight and very controlled. "I am your brother's mother and his counselor and—" "Alone," John says again. He says it the same way Mormont used to say things. Not loudly, not with force, with the quality of a statement that has already decided what it is and is not interested in being renegotiated. He meets Catelyn's eyes while he says it, which he knows she will not like, which he does anyway, because this is not something he is willing to compromise on. Mormont sealed that letter for Robb. He trusted John to deliver it to Robb's hands and no one else's, and John has ridden for weeks through the winter north to do exactly that, and he is not going to stop 1 tent-length short of doing it properly. Rob looks at his mother. Something passes between them, the specific silent communication of two people who have been managing each other's feelings in difficult circumstances for a long time. Catelyn reads it. She does not like it. She closes her mouth. "Get some rest," Rob says to Jon. "We talk in the morning." The letter, in the morning. Rob picks up the letter. He holds it but does not open it, and he looks at Jon with the expression of a king who has learned that some things should be done properly and in private rather than quickly and in company, and who has learned this the hard way. "I'll read it tonight. Alone. Tomorrow we talk." Jon looks at him for a moment. Then he nods. A brother of the watch. One of Rob's men who has the slightly bewildered air of a soldier assigned to a task outside his usual competence, leads Jon to a tent at the camp's edge and leaves him to it. The tent is empty and plain and has a pallet and 2 blankets, and it is the most comfortable thing Jon has seen in weeks. He is crossing the camp toward it when Mage Mormont sees him. She is coming from the direction of the horse lines, which is where Mage Mormont goes when she needs to think, because horses do not require anything of you beyond basic competence, and she has found them useful companions for grief. She stops when she sees him. Her eyes go to his face first, reading it the way soldiers read faces, and then they drop to the sword at his belt. They stay there. Longclaw hangs at Jon's hip in its scabbard, the white stone direwolf of the pommel catching the flat morning light. It is a sword that Mage Mormont knows. She knows the grain of the blade, and the weight of the hilt, and the precise quality of the Valyrian steel that makes it different from every other weapon in the world. She knows it because she carried it once, from Bear Island to the Wall, through rain and mud, on the occasion of her nephew's exile and her brother's grief, and placed it in Gior's hands herself. She knows what it means that Jon is carrying it here, south of the Wall, with weeks of hard riding on his face, and a letter that closed the tent to everyone but the king. For a long moment she does not speak. She looks at the sword. Jon meets her eyes. He does not explain. There is nothing to explain that she has not already worked out, and Mage Mormont is not a woman who requires things explained to her that she has already understood. He nods once. She looks at him for another moment. Then she looks away, back toward the horse lines, and he sees her jaw set with the particular determination of a woman deciding which feelings are for now and which ones are for later, and in what order to put them. She says nothing. Jon keeps walking. The tent is small and cold and quiet. Jon sits on the pallet with his cloak still on, and Longclaw unbelted and lying along the blanket beside him. The 2 letters are inside his cloak. One of them is no longer his to carry. It is in Rob's hands now, and tonight Rob will read it. And tomorrow, the world inside this camp will change in a way that it cannot be changed back from. He has been carrying that change for weeks. He has been riding south with it, pressing against his chest and keeping him awake at wayhouses, and making the long, empty miles of the King's Road feel like something other than simple distance. He was carrying it before he knew exactly what it was, from the moment Mormont looked at him in that grain store and said, "I'm going to tell you something." Tomorrow, Rob reads it. Tomorrow, Jon stops being the only one in this camp who knows. He lies back on the pallet and looks at the tent roof and listens to the sounds of the camp settling around him, the fires and the horses, and the low voices of men who are never fully at rest because a war does not permit fully resting. The sounds of the living world. The sounds of somewhere south of the Wall where the dead are not walking. He does not sleep, but for the first time since Craster's Keep, he is not moving. And somewhere in the difference between those two things there is, if not rest, then at least the shape of what rest might eventually feel like. He waits for morning. Chapter 7. The letter opens. The morning comes grey and cold, the way all mornings have come in the Riverlands this season, and John is awake before it arrives because he never fully slept. He is in Rob's tent by the time the camp is properly stirring. Rob is already there, already dressed, already composed, the letter on the table in front of him still sealed, as if he waited for John before opening it, which, John understands without it being said, is exactly what he did. They agreed to this without agreeing to it. They decided it the way brothers decide things, without discussing the decision, through the mutual understanding that some things should be witnessed. Rob breaks the seal. He reads it. He reads slowly, the way careful people read things they suspect will require more than one pass. John watches his face and does not watch his face, the two things alternating the way they do when you want to see someone's reaction, and also respect that the reaction is theirs to have privately. He looks at the letter. He looks at Rob. He looks at the table. He looks at Rob's hands, which are still on the letter, with the particular stillness of someone who is very deliberately not moving. Halfway through, Rob stops. He looks up. He looks at John's face, at the long jaw and the dark hair and the grey eyes, the eyes that are the grey of every Stark John has ever stood beside. Rob has those eyes too, beneath the Tully colouring. He is looking at John with those eyes now, and John watches him put something together. Not for the first time. John can see it is not for the first time. That Rob has been circling this conclusion since last night, since he read the letter alone in the small hours and then read it again, and then spent the rest of the night not sleeping either. He is confirming what he already worked out in the dark. He looks back at the letter and finishes reading it. The tent is very quiet. Outside, the camp makes its morning sounds, fires, horses, voices, the ordinary business of men who are going to fight a war today or tomorrow and need to eat and sleep and argue before they do it. None of it intrudes. The tent has the quality of a space where something is being decided. Rob sets the letter down. He does not fold it. He leaves it flat on the table between them, as if folding it would be a way of putting it away, and he is not ready to put it away yet. Aegon Targaryen, Rob says. That's what the letter says. A silence, long enough to be serious, short enough not to be afraid. Say something else, John says. Say what you're actually thinking. Rob looks at him. He almost smiles. Not quite, but the ghost of it is there. The familiar reflex of a boy who grew up grinning at Jon Snow over practice swords in Winterfell's yard. I'm thinking that you have a better claim to the Iron Throne than every man currently killing people over it. I don't want the Iron Throne. I know. I'm serious, Rob. I know, Rob says again. And there is something in his voice that cuts the protest off cleanly. He is not dismissing it. He is saying, I believe you, and I also know that what you want and what this secret does in the world are not the same thing, and we need to talk about both. Sit down, John. John sits. They sit across the table from each other with the letter between them and look at it, which is easier than looking at each other for a moment, because the letter is the thing that changed everything, and it helps to look at it directly. To make it real. Lyanna Stark, Rob says quietly. She was my father's sister. She was your mother. Yes. And Ned, he brought you back from the Tower of Joy and said you were his. Yes. Rob is quiet for a moment. He picks up the letter and reads one section of it again. John can see his eyes moving, going back to a specific part, and then he sets it down again. He never told anyone, not my mother, not Robert, not in 20 years. He pauses. That was love. John says nothing. He said this to himself, in the forest north of the wall, walking south in the dark, and he does not need to say it again right now. It is enough that Robb said it. It is enough that someone else in the world knows what Ned Stark carried and chose to carry and why. Do you want to press a claim? Robb says. The question is direct, the way Robb asks the questions that matter, without softening, because softening them would be a kind of disrespect. No. Not to the Iron Throne, not to anything. No. Robb looks at him for a long moment. Then he nods. He picks up the letter and folds it, carefully, along its original creases, and he puts it inside his own coat. He says, "Then we keep this between us. You and me and whoever else absolutely must know." He pauses. There are things I want to do with this, things I need to think about. But nothing happens until I've thought about it. John nods. The tent entrance opens. Catelyn walks in. She reads their faces the way she reads everything, quickly, comprehensively, without making it obvious that she is doing it. She stops just inside the entrance, and she looks at Robb, and then at John, and then at the slight change in the shape of the air in this tent, which is the change that comes when two people have just finished having a conversation that mattered enormously and have not yet recovered the normal texture of a room. She says, "Tell me." "Mother," Robb begins, "you said you would read it alone. You read it with your brother. That is not alone. Tell me what it says." Robb looks at John. John gives him nothing. It is not John's secret to give, and not John's place to decide how much Catelyn is told. That is Robb's judgment to make. John is not going to make it for him, Robb tells her. He does not read the letter to her. He tells her what is in it, in the blunt, careful way he has been telling her difficult things for a year. The same way he told her about Ned, the same way he told her about the fist, stripping the information down to what she needs to have to function, and trusting her to handle the weight of it. He tells her that Jon's parentage is not what anyone believed, that Ned Stark didn't father Jon Snow on some woman in the south, that Jon's father was Rhaegar Targaryen, who wed Lyanna Stark in a secret ceremony in Dorne before Jon was born, that this makes Jon the legitimate son of a prince of the Targaryen dynasty, that Mormont knew, because Aemon Targaryen told him, and Mormont sent Jon south so that Robb would know. Catelyn listens. She does not move during any of it. She stands inside the entrance of the tent, and she listens with her hands folded, and her face arranged in the composed expression, and her eyes fixed on Robb's face, tracking the words as they arrive, filing them in the way she files everything, by what they mean, by what they cost, by what they require. When Robb finishes, she is quiet. Then something moves across her face that Jon has never seen there before. It is there and gone in a single breath. A loosening, something that might in other circumstances be called relief. She looks at Jon for one unguarded moment, with an expression that contains, briefly, something that is not hostility and not warmth, but the particular quality of a woman realizing she was wrong about a thing she was wrong to be angry about in the first place. It is there, and then it is gone, sealed back beneath the composed face, and what replaces it is colder and more careful than what was there before. "He is more dangerous now," she says. Her voice is very quiet. "Not less. A bastard in a Night's Watch cloak is nothing. The legitimate son of Rhaegar Targaryen is a claim that every faction in this war will try to use or destroy." She looks at Robb. Joffrey's people will want him dead. Stannis will see him as a rival. The lords of the realm who want a Targaryen restoration will want to put him on the throne, whether he wants to go there or not. She pauses. This does not make him safer. This makes him the most dangerous person in this camp. I know, Robb says. Then you understand that keeping this secret is not a kindness. It is a necessity. I know that too. She looks at Jon one more time. Her face is the controlled face again, settled back into its familiar lines. Whatever moved across it a moment ago has been packed away somewhere Catelyn keeps the things she is not ready to account for. She says nothing else to him. She turns and walks back out of the tent, because she knows when a conversation is finished, and this one is finished. The entrance falls closed behind her. Robb and Jon sit in the quiet. She was relieved, Jon says. For a moment. Yes, Robb says, because it means your father didn't betray her. Robb looks at the tent entrance. Yes, he says again, more quietly. I think that's been sitting in her for 16 years, and she didn't know she was carrying it. Jon thinks about that. He thinks about Ned Stark keeping a secret that exonerated him to his wife, and keeping it anyway, because keeping it was the thing that kept Jon alive. He thinks about what that costs, what it cost Ned, and what it cost Catelyn, and what it cost the years between them that might have been different. He does not say any of this. There is nothing to say about it that is useful. He just holds it, the way you hold things that are true and painful and unchangeable. That evening Mage Mormont comes to his tent. She does not knock or call out. She simply lifts the entrance and comes in and stands in the small space with her arms at her sides and her spiked mace at her hip and her grey hair loose around her jaw. She looks like what she is, a woman who has been deciding all day what she came here to say and has settled on saying less rather than more. She looks at Longclaw, where Jon has it resting against the tent's centre post. Jor gave you that sword, she says. It is not a question. She knew this. She knew it before Jon arrived, because word of Mormont's gift had reached her through the channels that information travels when you are the Lord Commander's sister, and you have been paying attention. A year ago, Jon says. He had the pommel changed, the bear replaced with a direwolf. Mage is quiet for a moment. He wrote to me about it, she says. He said he gave it to a bastard boy with a Stark name who saved his life in the middle of the night. She pauses. He said, if Jorah ever comes back, tell him it went somewhere worthy. Jon says nothing. What I didn't know, Meg says, is what he did with it at the end. She looks at Jon directly. Tell me. So Jon tells her. He tells her about the night at Craster's Keep, the dark, the cold grain store, the old bear sitting on a sack with the letter in his hand. He tells her about the 2 letters, Aemon's and Mormont's. He tells her that Mormont read her brother the contents. He stops himself at that, corrects it. He told me something about myself, something he'd been carrying since before the fist. He tells her that Mormont gave him the sealed letter for Robb, and the order to ride south, and framed it as a command so it would not be desertion. He tells her about Mormont putting his hand on Longclaw's hilt before Jon left. Not taking it, not giving it again. Just resting his hand there for a moment, the way you touch something familiar before you stop being able to touch it. Mage listens to all of it, standing still, her arms at her sides, her face doing what it does, which is very little on the surface, while a great deal goes on beneath. She is the kind of woman whose grief takes the same shape as everything else she does. Contained, upright, requiring no witness. When John finishes, she is quiet for a long time. "He always knew what mattered," she says. She says it the way she said he was a good man the day before. Straight, without decoration, the words carrying exactly what they need, to carry and no more. It is the highest praise Mage Mormont gives to anything, that it knew what mattered and did not let the things that did not matter get in the way. She looks at Longclaw one more time. Then she looks at John. "Take care of it," she says. She means the sword. John thinks she also means something else. He thinks she means, "Take care of whatever my brother saw in you that made him spend his last night sending you south instead of thinking about his own survival. Take care of the thing that made it worth it." "I will," John says. She nods once. She goes. John sits alone in his tent, with Longclaw leaning against the post, and the camp making its night sounds around him, and the letter that is no longer his responsibility folded inside Rob's coat, somewhere in the large tent at the center of the camp. Something has shifted. He cannot say exactly what. Only that when he arrived yesterday, he was carrying everything alone, and tonight he is not, and the weight is the same, but the distribution of it is different, and different is not nothing. He sleeps, finally. It is not peaceful, but it is sleep. Chapter 8. The Prisoner. Rob's idea surfaces the morning after the letter. He does not present it as an idea. He presents it as a necessity, which is how Rob presents most things he has already decided. And he presents it to John first, before Catelyn, before anyone else, which is itself a thing that has shifted between them. Before, John was a bastard in a black cloak who delivered a letter. Now he is the reason the letter exists, and that changes how the information travels. "I want to bring Jaime Lannister in here," Rob says. "I want him to see you." John looks at him. "Why?" "Because Jaime Lannister served on Rhaegar's Kingsguard. He stood at that man's shoulder for years. He knows that face better than almost anyone alive." Rob pauses. He has the careful expression of someone making a tactical argument and hoping the person he is making it to will follow the logic without needing it spelled out further. If the secret doesn't hold when Jaime looks at you, it won't hold anywhere. John understands. It is the same logic as testing a rope before you trust your weight to it. If Jaime looks at Jon and sees nothing, if the resemblance is not there, or is there but too subtle to read, then the secret can hold in the wider world. If Jaime looks at Jon and sees something, then they need to know that now, while Jaime is chained in a camp in the Riverlands and not standing free in King's Landing or on a ship to Essos. And if he does see something, Jon says, then we know the shape of the problem. Rob's voice is even. Better to know it. Jon nods once. Catelyn objects. She objects with the measured precision of a woman who has chosen her battles carefully for a year and knows this one is worth having. She stands in the tent and makes the argument that is correct, that bringing Jaime Lannister into the same room as Jon Snow, and then watching Jaime Lannister's face, is the kind of move that creates information you cannot uncreate. And that Jaime Lannister is a man with his own reasons for every reaction, and that the gap between what his face shows and what his mind concludes is not a gap they can measure or control. She is not wrong. Rob knows she is not wrong. He overrides her anyway. He's chained, Rob says. He can see whatever he sees. He can conclude whatever he concludes. He cannot leave this camp, and I need to know. Catelyn looks at Jon. Jon looks back at her with the expression he uses when he is not going to be helpful in an argument he is at the center of, present attentive, giving nothing. It is, he is dimly aware, an expression he learned from Mormont. She turns and walks to the corner of the tent where she sometimes stands when she disagrees with something and has decided to let it happen anyway. She does not leave. Leaving would mean abandoning the field, and Catelyn Stark does not abandon fields. Robb sends for Jaime Lannister. They hear him before they see him. Chains make a particular sound when they are on a person rather than hanging on a hook, the muted, irregular rhythm of metal accommodating movement, announcing its wearer with each step. Jaime Lannister arrives at the tent entrance with that sound preceding him, and 2 guards flanking him, and the expression of a man who has decided the best way to survive captivity with his dignity intact is to treat the entire situation as a mild inconvenience that he is too well bred to comment on at length. He is 33 years old, and he looks it in the way that men look their age, when that age has been spent doing difficult things, rather than sitting at court. He has been a prisoner for months, and it shows in the quality of his state. The hair longer than a knight would choose, the jaw unshaved, the quality of his clothing gone from rich to merely functional, and it does not show in the way he carries himself, which is the carrying of a man who would rather die than adjust his posture to accommodate captivity. He looks at Robb. The look he gives Robb is the look a grown man gives a boy who is holding a sword in a negotiation, a look that acknowledges the sword, dismisses the boy, and communicates all of this in a single glance with the economy of someone who has spent decades reading and projecting power in rooms full of dangerous people. He looks at Catelyn, which produces a different expression, something more considered, more complicated. He and Catelyn have a history that Jon doesn't know all of and does not need to know all of right now. Whatever it is, Jaime files it and moves on. Then he looks at Jon and stops. It is not obvious. It is 2 seconds, perhaps less, and a man watching from outside the room for anything other than that specific thing would not catch it. The eyes moving to Jon's face, sweeping it the way a former Kingsguard sweeps a room, cataloguing, assessing, checking for the things that require a response. Jon is lean and dark-haired and grey-eyed, standing near the table in his travelling clothes with Longclaw at his belt, and he looks like a young Stark. He looks exactly like a young Stark. But there is something in the jaw. There is something in the way Jon holds himself. Not the posture of a soldier, not quite, but the posture of someone who learned to move through space with a particular kind of care, the care of someone aware of being watched. There is something around the eyes that is the grey of the Starks, but darker, the way water is darker at depth, and Jaime has stood close enough to a Targaryen prince to know what the eyes of that bloodline look like, even when the colour is wrong, even when the surface is all stark, even when 16 years of the North have layered themselves over the top of whatever is underneath. He knows that jaw. He has seen it in silver gold, not dark-haired, but the shape is the shape. 1 second, 2 seconds, the recognition happens, and then Jaime Lannister, who is whatever else he is, deeply competent at the performance of strategic indifference, takes it and puts it somewhere it will not be readable on his face. He schools his expression into blankness. It is 1 second too late. Robb saw it. Jon saw it. Catelyn, from her corner, saw it. Jaime's eyes move away from Jon. He looks at the ceiling of the tent with the expression of a man surveying the architecture. He looks at his chains with the expression of a man who has several opinions about their quality, but is too polite to share them. "Well," he says, "this is an interesting collection of people." His voice is the voice he always uses, dry, precise, the kind of cultured drawl that carries a faint suggestion that the room is slightly beneath his usual standard of entertainment. I don't suppose someone could tell me why I was brought here, so I can decide whether to be offended or simply bored. Robb looks at him for a long moment. He does not answer. Jaime looks back at John one more time. A shorter look than before, quick, almost involuntary, the eyes moving before the will can stop them. He looks at Longclaw, at the white stone direwolf on the pommel. He looks at John's face. Then he looks at Robb. "I assume this is the part where you explain what you want," he says. "You could simply ask, you know. I've been in this camp long enough to develop opinions on nearly everything. I'm quite talkative when properly motivated." "Take him back," Robb says to the guards. Jaime goes with the guards the same way he arrived, unhurried, the chains making their irregular music, the posture unchanged. At the tent entrance he pauses without turning around. He does not say anything. He pauses just long enough for it to be a choice, and then he walks out. The entrance falls closed. The three of them stand in the quiet. Robb looks at John. John looks at Robb. Catelyn is still in her corner, and she is looking at neither of them. She is looking at the tent entrance, where Jaime just was, with the expression of a woman running numbers. "He knows," she says. Her voice is flat and certain. "Not I think he knows. Not it seemed like he might have. He knows." A silence. Then, "Which means Cersei will know. If he ever leaves this camp, if he ever speaks to anyone who can carry a message to King's Landing, if he is ever traded or ransomed or released." She pauses. "Cersei will know there is a Targaryen boy in the Riverlands carrying a Mormont sword, and she will have questions, and she will find the answers, and then she will send people to deal with the answers." "He won't be released," Robb says. "Wars end," Catelyn says. "Prisoners are traded. Circumstances change." She finally looks at Robb, and her face has the expression it gets when she is not angry, but wishes she were. Because anger would be simpler than what she is actually feeling, which is the cold resignation of someone who said this was a dangerous game and has just been proven right. "I told you." Robb's jaw tightens. He doesn't argue with her, because she is correct, and they both know she is correct, and arguing would be wasting time they could spend on the actual problem. He looks at John. "He didn't say anything," John says. "He's not going to say anything. Not now. Not while he's here." Robb's voice is careful. He'll say it when saying it does him the most good. That's how the Lannisters work. They hold information until it's worth spending. He pauses. "Which means we have time. But not as much as I thought." John looks at the tent entrance. He thinks about Jaime Lannister's face in the moment before he controlled it. The 2 seconds of open recognition, the something that moved across those sharp eyes, that calculation, that click of a man putting 2 things together that he was not expecting to be put together in this particular tent in a Riverlands war camp. He thinks about all the places that recognition could travel if Jaime wanted it to. "The secret was never going to hold forever," John says. "No," Robb agrees, "which means we need to decide what to do with it before someone else decides for us." Robb looks at him for a long moment. He is 16 years old, and he is the king in the north, and he is fighting a war on 2 fronts while sitting on a 3rd secret that could start an entirely different war, and he has the particular expression of a young man who has been handed too many things at once and has decided that complaining about the weight of them is not useful. He says, "Give me a few days to think." John nods. Catelyn, from her corner, says nothing. She has said what she needed to say. She watches her son stand in the middle of the tent with the weight of the problem on him, and she does what she always does when Robb is thinking. She stays nearby, and she lets him think, and she is there when he is done. The morning carries on outside the tent, indifferent to all of them. Chapter 9. 5 Kings, 1 Throne. The ravens come in threes on the morning of the 3rd day. The first one arrives before breakfast, carried by a Meister's boy who is trying not to run and failing. The second arrives an hour later, this one from a different source, a lord's raven, with a different seal and a different hand, but the same news underneath. The third arrives by midday, and by then the camp already knows, the way camps always know things before the official word reaches the commanders, through the osmosis of soldiers and servants, and the particular speed at which disaster travels when a lot of people are watching for it. The Battle of the Blackwater is over. Stannis Baratheon's fleet sailed on King's Landing. The river mouth blazed with wildfire. Green flame, the accounts say, an unnatural fire that burned on water and swallowed ships whole. The Lannister defence held. Tywin Lannister arrived from the south with a relieving force at the critical moment and broke Stannis' army between the city walls and the hammer of fresh troops. Stannis has retreated to his ships, or to Dragonstone, or both. The Iron Throne is still Joffrey Baratheon's. Robb reads the reports in the order they arrive, and Jon watches his face, which does what it does during military briefings. It receives the information, files it, processes what it means without the processing being visible until Robb has finished processing it and is ready to speak. Far to the south, in the aftermath, the city breathes. King's Landing has the particular quality of a place that has just survived something it didn't expect to survive, and is trying to decide whether to be relieved or simply exhausted. The streets are full of debris and rumour in equal measure. The Blackwater still carries the smell of wildfire, that wrong chemical smell that clings to everything it touches and does not release. In the Red Keep, Tyrion Lannister sits with a face that will carry the mark of the battle for the rest of his life. A wound taken in the chaos, a scar that is still fresh, the aftermath of a night spent managing an impossible defense against a claimant who nearly took everything. He is 26 years old, and he has just won a battle that nobody expected him to win, and the reward for this is that his father has arrived to take credit for the victory, and the city's surviving lords are already lining up to congratulate Tywin rather than the man who held the walls. This is, in its way, the most Lannister outcome possible. Cersei, 33, sits in a room in the upper castle and watches the city from a window and thinks about what comes next. Stannis is broken but not dead. He will come again, or someone else will come. The throne is held. Joffrey is alive, and these two facts are the only ones that matter to her, and she holds them with the grip of a woman who has been holding the two things that matter most with both hands for a very long time. Out on the retreating ships, Stannis Baratheon sits with the silence of a man who has just watched a war turn in a single night. He is 35 years old, and he has been certain of his claim to the Iron Throne with the absolute certainty of a man who does not believe in anything except what is demonstrably true, and what is demonstrably true is that he is Robert's rightful heir, and Joffrey is not Robert's son, and the realm should acknowledge this and bend. The realm has not bent. He will try again. He is not the kind of man who stops trying. None of them know about a boy in a Night's Watch cloak in the Riverlands, with a Valyrian steel sword and a secret that makes every one of their claims irrelevant. For now, back in Robb's camp, Jon has been watching Robb read for the better part of an hour when Robb finally puts the last report down and looks up. Stannis is broken. he says. I gathered. Tywin Lannister saved the city, which means Joffrey owes his throne to his grandfather now, more than before. Robb pushes the reports aside with the flat of his hand. That is not a comfortable position to rule from. It's not our problem, Jon says. Robb looks at him. Everything in King's Landing is our problem. We are at war with King's Landing. That's what I want to talk to you about. Robb leans back in his chair and looks at Jon with the expression he uses when he suspects what is coming and is not yet sure how he feels about it. He has had this expression several times in the past few days, which means he has been thinking about it too, which means this conversation has been building since before either of them started it. Jon says, I need to go back to the wall. The tent is quiet. I know you're going to say no, Jon continues. I know you have reasons. I want you to hear mine first. Robb opens a hand. Go ahead. Jon has been composing this argument for days, not because he needs persuading. He knew he was going back to the wall before he arrived in this camp, knew it from the moment Mormont pressed Longclaw's hilt into his hand and said, find your brother, which was not the same as stay with your brother, but because Robb needs to be persuaded, and Robb deserves an argument that is honest, rather than simply convenient. Every king in this war, Jon says, is burning the realm to decide who rules what's left of it. Joffrey, Stannis, you, Balon Greyjoy, somewhere to the north. They are all fighting over the Iron Throne, as if the Iron Throne is the thing that matters most in the world right now. He pauses. It is not. The others, Robb says. I was at the Fist. I saw them. Not stories, not reports. I saw them. Hundreds of whites walking on dead legs and not stopping when you put steel in them. Things in the dark that fire slows down but doesn't kill. He meets Robb's eyes. They don't care who wins this war. They don't care about the Iron Throne or the King in the North or the Lord of Dragonstone. They are coming, and the only thing between them and every living person in these kingdoms is the wall. And the wall is undermanned, and the Lord Commander is dead, and the Watch has lost most of its ranging force. I know, Robb says. Then you know that someone has to hold it, and you know that the men who are on it right now are not enough. Jon pauses. I was there. I know the shape of what's coming. I know the ground. I know the brothers. I know. He stops. He does not know how to say the next part without it sounding like more than it is. He says it anyway. I know it matters. More than anything happening in this camp. Robb is quiet for a long moment. He looks at the reports on the table, Stannis' retreat, Tywin's arrival, the green fire on the river. 5 kings fighting over the ruins of a summer kingdom while winter buries the roads. You are not a sworn brother, Robb says finally. Not anymore, in any meaningful sense. You left. Mormont ordered you to leave. Whatever the oath meant before, it means something different now. He looks at Jon with the expression of someone who is about to say the thing they have been not saying. And now I know who you are. You are not a bastard steward who can be sent back to guard a wall. You are. I know what I am, Jon says. I've had weeks to think about what I am. And what I've decided is that none of it, none of the names, none of the bloodlines, none of what the letters say, changes what I saw at the Fist. He holds Robb's eyes. I am not going back there to make a claim. I am not going back there to die forgotten. I am going back there because someone has to hold the wall, and I know how, and I have a sword that kills what's coming, and most of the men up there do not. Robb looks at Longclaw, the white stone dire wolf on the pommel, the Valyrian steel that Mormont gave Jon with the full knowledge of what Jon was, and why that meant something. "I won't let you go back there to die unknown," Robb says. His voice is quiet, but completely certain. The voice of a king who has made a decision about someone he loves, and is not going to be moved from it easily. "Whatever else happens, that much I can prevent." "I'm not going back there to die," Jon says. "I'm going back there to hold it." They look at each other across the table. The argument doesn't resolve. It sits between them with the weight of something that hasn't yet been decided, that requires more time or more information, or simply more of the particular willingness to let something be unresolved that neither of them has fully developed yet. Robb is 16, and certain in the way that good commanders are certain. Jon is 16, and certain in a different way. The certainty of someone who has seen a specific thing and cannot unsee it. Robb picks up the reports again. He looks at the numbers, the Lannister forces, the Baratheon retreat, the disposition of his own army across the Riverlands. There is a war here that needs fighting. There is also a war to the north that nobody is fighting. "Give me a few more days," he says. "There are things I need to do before anyone goes anywhere." Jon nods. He moves to the tent entrance and stands there for a moment with his hand on the flap, looking out at the camp. The fires, the men, the ordinary machinery of an army that is fighting over who sits on a chair in a city far to the south. He looks north, the Riverlands in winter, brown and cold and vast. Somewhere past them, past the neck, past the empty north and the wall and the haunted forest, something is moving in the dark that does not care about any of this. Someone has to care. Jon lets the tent flap fall and goes to find somewhere to sit with his thoughts, which are the same thoughts they have been since Craster's Keep and haven't gotten simpler, and will not get simpler. He is Aegon Targaryen, and Jon Stark and Jon Snow, and none of those names tell him what to do with the knowledge of what is coming from the north. But Longclaw at his belt does. He goes north in his mind, even when his body is still. He waits for Robb to think. Chapter 10. Jon Stark. Robb makes his decision on the fourth morning. Jon knows it the moment he is summoned, because the summons comes through a junior officer rather than a guard, and there is a particular quality to the way the man delivers it, careful, as if carrying something fragile, that tells Jon this is not a military briefing. This is something Robb has decided and is ready to do. He goes to the tent. Robb is there with his camp meister, a thin, older man with ink-stained fingers who has the expression of someone who has been writing documents in difficult circumstances for long enough that he has stopped finding any document remarkable. He has fresh vellum on the table and a quill already inked. Robb looks at Jon when he enters. "Close the entrance," Robb says. Jon closes it. "Sit down." Jon sits. Robb is quiet for a moment. He has the expression he gets before difficult things. Not hesitant, never quite that, but gathered, as if he is making sure everything is in order before he begins. He looks at Jon with the particular attention of someone who is about to do something that cannot be undone and wants to do it with full awareness of what it is. "Jon Snow," Robb says, "is a bastard. A bastard has no legal standing, no inheritance, no claim to anything. He is at the mercy of the people around him, and the story those people tell about him." He pauses. "I am the king in the north. That is what my lords say I am. And until someone takes it from me, that is what I am. And a king in the north can legitimize a bastard of the north." Jon says nothing. "I am legitimizing you," Robb says, "as Jon Stark, true-born son of Eddard Stark of Winterfell. The letter will say nothing of Rhaegar, nothing of Lyanna, nothing of Targaryens. He holds Jon's eyes. It will say that you are a Stark, because you are, and because that is what you need to be able to move through the world without being at everyone's mercy. Jon looks at the table. He looks at the vellum, the quill, the maester waiting with the patient efficiency of a man who writes what he is told to write. He says, "And Catelyn. I'll handle Catelyn." He does not handle Catelyn before Catelyn arrives. She comes in 10 minutes after Jon, which suggests she was told what Robb intended and came immediately rather than being called, which in turn suggests she had been watching for signs of exactly this decision and recognized them when they appeared. She is 35 years old, and she has been managing her son's court for a year, and there is very little that happens in this camp that she does not know about before it becomes official. She looks at the vellum. She looks at the maester. She looks at Robb. "Outside," she says, to the maester and to Jon together, in the voice she uses when she has decided a conversation is going to happen and has decided that neither of those people will be present for it. The maester goes without comment. Jon looks at Robb. Robb gives him a small nod. "Go, I'll handle this." And Jon goes, because this is Robb's fight and Catelyn's fight, and he is the subject of it, which means he is the worst possible person to adjudicate it. He stands outside the tent entrance in the cold morning air, and does not quite listen, and hears most of it anyway, because the tent walls are canvas, and Catelyn Stark is not trying to be quiet. She makes every argument. She makes them in the order of most immediate to most existential, because she is organized even in fury, and Jon can hear the structure of it as clearly as he can hear the words. She starts with the legal complications. A legitimized bastard becomes an heir, and a king in the north who has no children yet and is fighting a war that might kill him has just created a succession question where there was not one before. She moves to the strategic. A man named Jon Stark, with a letter of legitimization, is one accusation away from being identified as the Targaryen heir that Jaime Lannister has now had 3 days to think about, and has almost certainly finished thinking about. She ends with the personal, which is the argument she makes last, because it is the most honest and the most vulnerable. She is Catelyn Tully Stark, and she married Eddard Stark, and raised his children, and lost him, and she has been doing all of it correctly, and making Jon Stark on a piece of paper does not give her 16 years back. Jon does not hear Robb's responses. He hears the pauses where the responses are. He hears Catelyn fall silent twice, the way she falls silent when she has been answered with something that is true enough to require a moment before continuing. The last silence is the longest. Then Robb says something short and final in the voice he uses when he has made a decision, and the conversation about the decision is over. Catelyn comes out of the tent. She stops when she finds Jon standing 2 feet from the entrance. She looks at him with the expression she has been wearing since the morning the letter was read. Controlled, assessing, managing the distance between what she feels and what she will allow to show on her face. He can see the argument still moving in her. He can see the specific weight of the personal argument, the one she made last, which cost her something to make and has not stopped costing her since she made it. He thinks about what to say. He thinks about Ned, who kept a secret for 16 years that would have changed everything between Ned and Catelyn, and chose not to tell her because telling her was not the thing that mattered most. He thinks about what that cost her, the 16 years of hostility toward a boy who was never what she thought he was. "I'm sorry," he says. "It is not quite the right thing. It is also not quite the wrong thing. He is not apologizing for existing or for what Ned did. He is apologizing for the 16 years of a lie that he was inside of without knowing it, for the thing that was done to her in his name without her consent. It is the only apology available that is honest. Catelyn looks at him for a long moment. Then she walks past him toward the horse lines, because she is Catelyn Stark, and when she has lost a fight, she does not stand in the road discussing it. She walks past without speaking, and Jon watches her go and does not try to stop her. The letter takes less time to write than it took to fight over. The Maester writes it in the neat official hand of documents meant to outlast the circumstances that produced them. Jon Snow, natural son of Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, is henceforth by the authority of Robb Stark, King in the North, legitimized and recognized as Jon Stark, true-born son of House Stark, with all rights and standings thereto. It says nothing else. It does not need to say anything else. Robb signs it. He signs it with the particular deliberateness of someone signing something they intend to stand behind for the rest of their life. Mage Mormont is there. Robb had asked her to witness as a representative of the Northern Lords. She is the senior Northern Lord present, and a legitimization without witnesses is a document and not a ceremony, and Robb wanted it to be a ceremony, even if a small one. She stands near the table in her ringmail with her arms at her sides, and she watches Robb sign, and she watches the Maester seal it, and she says nothing throughout. When it is done, Robb holds it out to Jon. Jon takes it. He reads it. Jon Stark. He has been Jon Snow for 16 years. Jon Snow was a bastard boy from Winterfell who grew up with grey eyes and the long stark jaw and the particular loneliness of someone who belongs to a household but not quite fully to a family, who is loved but conditionally, who has a name but wears it like a garment that was made for someone else and altered for him. Jon Snow joined the Night's Watch and became Jon Snow of Castle Black, which was the same name in a different location. Jon Snow saved a Lord Commander's life and was given a sword that should not belong to a bastard. Aegon Targaryen he has been for 3 weeks since the night at Craster's Keep, and he does not know how to be that person yet. He is not sure he ever will. He does not know what Aegon Targaryen looks like from the inside, only from the outside, only from the letter that named him. Now he is Jon Stark on a piece of vellum sealed with a king's mark. 3 names. 1 person. He does not know which one is real, or if that is even the right question. He turns the letter over in his hands and holds it and looks at his name written in a Maester's ink and thinks, "This is the thing Ned couldn't give me. This is the thing Ned chose not to give me, because giving it would have required explaining it, and explaining it would have required trusting someone with the truth, and the truth was too dangerous to trust with anyone. He could not give it." Robb did. Jon folds the letter carefully and puts it inside his cloak, next to his chest, in the place where Aemon's letter and Mormont's letter travelled south with him through the winter. It is lighter than either of those. It is somehow heavier. He looks up at Robb. Robb is watching him with the expression of someone who has just done an irreversible thing and is not going to second-guess it, but is aware that it is irreversible. Mage Mormont, who has said nothing through all of this, speaks. "My brother chose well," she says. She is looking at Jon. Her voice is the same as always, flat, direct, carrying exactly what it needs to carry and nothing extra. "Whatever your name is." She nods once, to Robb and then to Jon together. the nod of a woman who has registered this moment and is satisfied with it, and she walks out of the tent. That night the fires are lower and the camp is quieter, the way camps go quiet after a few weeks in one place. The urgency of arrival, settling into the routine of staying, the men finding rhythms, the war taking a breath before the next thing. Robb finds Jon at the edge of the camp, near a small fire that one of the outriders built and then abandoned when the watch rotation changed. They sit on two stumps that someone has pulled into position on either side of the fire, the way stumps end up positioned near fires when an army has been in one place long enough to arrange the furniture. They do not talk for a while. The fire makes its sounds. The camp makes its sounds. The riverlands dark presses in from every side with the patient weight of a winter that is not going anywhere. Jon thinks about fires at Winterfell. He and Robb used to sit near fires in the Great Hall when they were young enough that sitting near fires in the Great Hall was something they could do together without anyone reading anything into it. Before Jon was old enough to understand the particular texture of his place in the household, before Catelyn's cool courtesy had fully resolved into something Jon understood rather than simply felt. Just two boys and a fire, the ordinary warmth of it. He thinks Robb is thinking about the same thing. He thinks because Robb has the look he gets when he is thinking about Winterfell, a specific tightness around the eyes, there and gone. When the war is over, Robb says quietly. He is looking at the fire. Come back. Jon looks at the fire too. We'll figure out the rest, Robb says. The names, the claims, what it means and what to do with it. All of it. When the war is over, come back, and we'll figure it out together. Jon is quiet for a moment. There's something I have to do first, he says. Robb nods. He knew that was coming. He has known since the argument in the tent, which he lost in the sense that Jon is still going north and won in the sense that Jon is not going back as Jon Snow the bastard steward. He is going back as Jon Stark, with a letter that says so, and a Valyrian steel sword at his hip, and a brother who knows what he is. The fire burns. The camp sleeps around them. Two brothers sitting by a fire in the Riverlands, in the cold, with the war on all sides, and the dark pressing in. Being 16 and being brothers, which is the thing that persists under everything else. Neither of them wants to be the one to end it. They sit there until the fire gets low. Chapter 11. North. He packs before first light. There is not much to pack. A Night's Watch brother in the field learns early to travel with only what he can carry at a run, and Jon has been doing this long enough that the inventory is short and familiar. Provisions from Robb's stores, enough for a hard ride north, wrapped in oilcloth against the cold. A waterskin. Flint. His cloak, which has been through worse than the road ahead, and will survive it. Longclaw, already belted. The letters inside his cloak, Aemon's, which he has kept because it is the only thing that exists in Aemon's handwriting that speaks his name into the world, and the letter of legitimization, which is folded in oilcloth and pressed against his chest next to the others. 3 letters. 3 pieces of the thing he is carrying. He goes to the remount line and finds the horse the campmaster offered him 2 days ago. A solid bay gelding with a calm eye and good feet, built for distance rather than speed, the kind of horse that gets you there when getting there is a long way off and the roads are not easy. He saddles him quietly in the dark. The horse breathes steam in the cold air and doesn't object to the hour or the cold or the stranger tightening his cinch. A good animal. Jon checks the cinch twice. He runs a hand down the gelding's neck the way you do when you are about to ask something of an animal and want the asking to start on good terms. The horse turns its head toward him briefly, warm breath against his sleeve, and then looks forward again. John leads him out of the line. Rob is already there. He is standing at the camp's edge in the dark before dawn, alone, without guards or officers or any of the apparatus that accompanies a king when he moves through his own camp in daylight. He is wearing a plain riding cloak rather than his armor, which means he came here to be Rob rather than to be the king in the north, and John understands the distinction and is grateful for it. They stand in the road with the horse between them and the camp behind them and the dark ahead, and neither of them speaks for a moment. This is not the kind of goodbye that wants witnesses. This is the kind that requires two people and a fire going out and the particular honesty of the hour before dawn, when the performance of being composed has run out of fuel, and what is left is just what is actually true. You have everything you need, Rob says. It comes out as a statement and also as a question. Yes. The letter's in good condition? The oilcloth is tight? Yes, Rob. A beat. Rob almost smiles. It is the same reflex as always, the faint suggestion of the boy at Winterfell who found the gap between solemnity and the actual texture of a moment and couldn't quite keep his face straight in it. I'm asking about the letter, he says. I'm not asking about you, because if I ask about you, I'll say things I've already said, and we'll be standing here until the camp wakes up and it becomes a public event. You've said them, John agrees. I have. And I've heard them. Then we're done. Rob pauses. If the wall falls, I know, ride south. If you need anything, men, supplies, ravens, send word to me before you need it, not after. I can't help you if I don't know what's happening. John nods. If you win your war, when? When you win your war, send food north, whatever you can spare from the harvest before winter locks the roads. The garrison is undermanned and underfed, and they're going to fight something that kills full-grown men in armor, and they need to not be starving when they do it. Rob is quiet for a moment. He looks at John with the expression of someone filing a request and simultaneously registering what the request says about the scale of the problem. Done, he says. You'll have food. John looks at him. He thinks about what he wants to say and decides on the shortest version of it, because the longest version exists between them already and has no need to be spoken aloud. Bran and Rickon, he says. Rob's face changes. John heard the rumor on the road coming south, the woman moving north who said Lord Stark's bastard and the little ones are dead. He did not press it then, because pressing it would not have changed anything, and he does not press it now, because pressing it will not change anything now either. But he wants Rob to know he heard it, and does not believe it, and is not going to pretend he didn't hear it. I heard the reports, John says carefully. On the road, I don't believe them. Rob's jaw tightens. He looks away for a moment, at the camp, at the dark, at the ground, anywhere except at John, because looking at John right now requires something he is keeping very closely managed. I don't believe them either, he says, quietly. I have reasons not to believe them, but I don't know. He pauses. I don't know. And the not knowing. He stops. He does not finish the sentence. He does not need to. John knows what not knowing feels like, when the thing you don't know is whether the two youngest people in a family you are responsible for are alive or dead. I'm sorry, John says, and means it. Rob nods. He takes a breath. He pulls the carefully managed composure back into place with the efficiency of long practice, which is something he learned from his father and does not know he'd learned. He looks at John. "Go," he says, "before I say more things I've already said." John mounts the bay gelding. He settles into the saddle and takes the reins and looks down at Rob standing in the road below him, auburn-haired and 16 and carrying a war and a king's title and the grief of a family scattered across a realm on fire. He looks like Ned, John thinks. Not in face. He will never look like Ned in face. But in the way he stands in the road with the weight on him and doesn't bend, that is Ned Stark's spine in Robb Stark's body. He turns the horse's head north. Mage Mormont is standing 10 feet away. John did not hear her come, which is the particular skill of a woman who has been moving through camps and battlefields for decades and has learned to arrive without announcing herself. She is in her ringmail, her spiked mace at her hip, her grey hair loose in the morning cold. She is looking at him with the expression she has been looking at him with since she recognized Longclaw in the yard. Not warm, not unfriendly. The specific expression of a woman calibrating a person and finding them acceptable. She does not say goodbye. She gives him a single brief nod, firm, certain, the nod of someone confirming something they have already decided. It is the nod she might give a soldier going somewhere difficult who she expects to acquit himself well. John nods back. He rides. Rob watches him go. He watches the bay gelding carry Jon Snow, Jon Stark. Jon, his brother, the man he has just tied the Stark name to, with wax and vellum, up the road and around the first long bend, and then the trees close over the road, and the black cloak disappears, and there is nothing there but the grey morning coming in from the east. He stands in the road. Catelyn comes to stand beside him. She came out of the camp sometime during the farewell, without either of them noticing. Or Rob noticed, and chose not to address it, which amounts to the same thing. She stands next to him now in the cold road, with her arms folded, and her face composed in the way it is always composed, and she looks at the empty road where Jon was. Neither of them speaks. There is nothing to say that the silence does not already say better. Rob watches the road. Catelyn watches the road. They are mother and son, and they have spent a year disagreeing about important things, and agreeing about other important things, and managing each other's grief and fear with the specific economy of people who love each other and are too busy surviving to say so often enough. She doesn't say she told him so. She would be right if she did, and she knows she would be right, and she says nothing. Rob turns and goes back to the war. Catelyn walks beside him. The Raven arrives an hour later. It comes from Castle Black, carried by one of the Watch's birds, and it is addressed to the king in the north in the careful hand of someone who is not sure the king in the north cares about what is happening at the wall, but has decided to tell him anyway, because the alternative is telling no one. The letter says, "An army beyond the wall, larger than anything the Watch has faced before, tens of thousands, perhaps more. Moving south. The garrison is not enough to hold. We need men, and we need them quickly. It does not name the army's leader." Rob reads it standing in the middle of his camp with the camp moving around him, his officers and his soldiers, and the machinery of his war going about its business in the morning light. He reads it twice. He looks north. The road is empty where Jon went. The trees have closed over it. He is somewhere in the Riverlands by now, riding, moving toward the Neck and the King's Road, and the long, cold distance between this camp and the wall. An hour ahead of a Raven, riding toward exactly what the Raven is warning about. Rob folds the letter. He looks at his officers. He looks at the map on the table in the nearest tent, the Riverlands and the Westerlands, and the road to King's Landing, the war he is fighting, the war that is consuming the realm and leaving the north unguarded. He looks north one more time. Then he goes inside and gets back to work. He does not know yet what he is going to do about the wall. He does not know how to fight two wars at once, in two directions, against two different kinds of enemies, with one army and not enough food, and a brother who just rode north toward the larger of the two problems. He will figure it out. He is Robb Stark, and that is what he does. But for a moment, just a moment, he stands at the tent entrance and looks north along the empty road and thinks about a boy with grey eyes and a direwolf sword riding toward the dark, carrying 3 names and the weight of what is coming, alone. Then he goes in. The war does not wait. Chapter 12. The watch begins again. Castle Black is afraid. Jon can feel it before he passes through the gate, in the way the sentries challenge him twice rather than once in the particular quality of their attention, which is not the routine suspicion of guards doing their job, but the sharper attention of men who are listening for something specific and finding it everywhere. He gives his name. He gives his rank, which is a complicated thing to give at this particular moment. He says, "Jon Snow, sworn brother, returning from the south." They let him through. The castle is thinner than when he left. He passed through weeks ago on his way south and noted the undermanning, the absence of the brothers who went ranging and have not come back. It is thinner now. The ranging's survivors have been absorbed back into the garrison's routine, but the number of them is not enough, and everyone here knows it, and the knowing sits on the castle like snow on a roof that was not built for this much weight. He leads the bay gelding to the stable and unsaddles him himself. The horse has served him well all these weeks north, and Jon gives him the attention he deserves. A proper rub-down, fresh water, grain from the stores. He takes longer than strictly necessary. He is in no hurry to face what comes next, and the horse does not require anything of him except competence, which he has. Sam finds him there. He comes through the stable door with the particular walk he gets when he has been watching for something and has finally seen it. Fast enough to be purposeful, not so fast as to be running. The compromise of a man who has learned to control the expression of his anxiety, if not the anxiety itself. He stops in the doorway and looks at Jon and breathes out once, the specific breath of relief. "You're alive," Sam says. "You sound surprised." "I'm not. He stops. He collects himself. "I'm glad." Jon turns from the horse and looks at his friend. Sam is rattled in a way that weeks have not fully smoothed over. There is something in his eyes that was not there before the fist, a specific knowledge of what the dark contains, the kind of knowledge you get from having been there when the thing in the dark arrived. Jon recognizes it, because he has it too. "Where did you go?" Sam says. "When you left Craster's." "Where?" "South," Jon says. Sam waits for more. Jon gives him nothing, which is not a refusal, so much as a recognition that the whole of it, the letters, Robb, the legitimization, the 3 names, is not a story for a stable in Castle Black, with the garrison listening through the walls. Sam reads this the same way he read Jon's expression in the dark of Craster's Keep the night Jon left. He understands that there is a reason, and he decides that the reason is enough, and he lets it rest. "The acting Castellan wants to see you," Sam says. "I know." "There's an army beyond the wall." "I know that too." Sam looks at him for a moment, at Jon's face, at Longclaw, at whatever he finds in the combination of the two that tells him what Jon has brought back from the south along with the road dust and the weeks of riding. He nods once, slowly, with the expression of someone confirming a hypothesis. "Good," Sam says, and means something larger than the word. The acting castellan is afraid, which John doesn't hold against him. The man has been holding a castle with not enough men, while the largest army ever reported beyond the wall assembles itself in the haunted forest with evident intention, and he has been doing this without the Lord Commander, who is dead, or the first ranger, who has been missing for over a year. Fear in these circumstances is the appropriate response. The only question is what a man does with it. He briefs John on the situation in the flat, efficient manner of someone who has been briefing people on bad news for weeks and has run out of ways to soften it. The army beyond the wall is real. The scouts, the few they have reported numbers that nobody in the castle fully believes, not because they doubt the scouts, but because the numbers are large enough that belief requires a physical effort. The wall will hold as long as the gates hold. The gates will hold as long as there are men to hold them. There are not enough men. John tells the castellan he is back. He does not explain where he went or why. He says he is ready to take a post and asks where he is needed most. The castellan, who has been praying for experienced brothers since the garrison thinned out, does not ask questions. He assigns John to the top of the wall. John goes first to Meister Aemon. The cell is the same. It is always the same. The door open, the small fire, the furs, the chair. The ancient man in the chair. Aemon is more still than the last time John saw him. He has the quality of very old things in winter, conserving, not moving unless movement is necessary, saving what warmth is left for the work of simply continuing. He turns his head toward the door before John's foot crosses the threshold. "John," he says. Not Jon Snow, not Jon's Dark, just John, which is either all of his names at once or none of them in particular, which may amount to the same thing. "Meister," John says. He pulls the stool close and sits and looks at the old man's face, which has the translucent quality of very old skin in firelight, the particular look of a face that has seen so much that the features have settled into a permanent expression of having seen everything and found it, on balance, comprehensible. "Tell me," Aemon says. John tells him. Briefly, in the way he tells things now, the stripped version, the one that contains what matters and leaves out what is only detail. He reached Robb. He delivered Mormont's letter. Robb read it. Robb knows. Robb said nothing to the broader camp, kept the secret between himself and the few who had to know. He legitimized Jon as Jon Stark. Aemon listens with his hands folded and his clouded eyes pointed at the fire. When Jon finishes, Aemon is quiet for a moment. "And the other name," he says. Jon says nothing. Aemon smiles. It is the first smile Jon has seen from him, or perhaps the first he has seen that reached the surface, the others being too slight and too brief to register. It is a small smile, the smile of a very old man who has been waiting for something to turn out in a particular way for a very long time, and has just received confirmation that it did. "Good," Aemon says. "The other name will keep." He is quiet again. The fire speaks. The castle above them and around them makes its sounds. Boots on stone, distant voices, the particular architecture of a fortress that has been inhabited for centuries and has absorbed all that inhabitation into its walls. Then Aemon says, "I knew your grandfather." Jon looks at him. "Aerys, before he was what he became. I was already old when he was young, old enough to be cautious about him, though I kept my cautions to myself for too long. He pauses. I watched your father be born, Rhaegar. I held his mother's hand when she was delivered of him, though she did not know who held her hand. I was the master of Dragonstone for a time, before I was sent here. Another pause. I held your grandmother's hand when she wept for what Westeros had become, for what her husband had made of it. She wept quietly, your grandmother. She did not believe in weeping where anyone could hear. Jon sits with this, the weight of it, the generations, the years, the long reach of this man's memory extending back through everything that produced the moment Jon is sitting in. I do not know what you will become, Aemon says. He turns his clouded eyes toward Jon with the precision he has always used, the precision of someone who does not need sight to look at something squarely. I have lived long enough to know that what people become is not predictable from what they are. I have watched good men become terrible, and frightened men become brave, and the certain become doubtful, and the doubtful become the only ones willing to stand. He pauses. But I know this. You are the only Targaryen I have ever known who chose the wall. Jon looks at him. Every Targaryen who came before you, every one, looked at the throne, or at the dragons, or at the prophecy, or at the claim. They looked south. Aemon turns his face back to the fire. You looked north. You looked at the thing that is actually coming, and you came here to stand in front of it. He pauses. Your father would not have done that. Your grandfather would not have done that. I am not sure I would have done that, if I had been what you are. He is quiet for a moment. I chose the wall for different reasons. You chose it because it was right. Those are not the same thing. Jon is quiet. He is thinking about Mormont at Crastas. Keep saying, you are not running. I am sending you. He is thinking about riding south through the winter north and arriving at Robb's camp and delivering a letter that changed the shape of the world inside that camp. He is thinking about sitting by a fire with Robb, and neither of them wanting to be the one to end it. He is thinking about everything that has happened since the night in the grain store, and whether it has changed him, and deciding that it has and also that it has not. He reaches inside his cloak and produces the letter of legitimization. He holds it, but doesn't unfold it. I am Jon Stark on paper, he says. Aemon turns toward him. And in your heart? Jon thinks about the question. He sits with it for the length of time it deserves, which is longer than a quick answer would suggest. I don't know yet, he says finally. I think I need to earn it before I know what it means. Aemon nods slowly. He reaches out, the way he reached for Longclaw before, carefully, with both hands, feeling for the thing he cannot see. Jon leans forward and holds the sword's scabbard and lets the old man's hands find the hilt, find the pommel, the white stone dire wolf under papery fingers. He chose well, Aemon says. Mormont. The same words Mage used, the same meaning, the old bear seeing something worth the gift and giving it, the gift of the sword and the gift of the order and the gift of a reason to go south that was also, underneath, a reason to come back. Jon waits until Aemon takes his hands away. Then he stands. Sleep, Maester, he says. I have been sleeping for 40 years, Aemon says. I am very good at it. Jon almost smiles. He leaves the cell. The door stays open, the way it always does. He goes up. The wall at this hour is a climb in the cold, the long staircase cut into the ice itself, 700 feet of ascent that the body registers as effort and the mind registers as distance from the world below. John climbs steadily, not rushing, letting his legs do the work while his mind does something else entirely. He comes out at the top onto the walkway. The wind hits him immediately. The wall's particular wind, which comes from the north and carries everything the north contains, the cold and the distance, and the smell of ice that has been here since before the memory of men. He walks to the edge and looks out. Below, the haunted forest. The trees run north and east and west as far as the eye reaches. The black and white of winter forest. The deep quiet of a place where men do not go, and where, in the dark beneath the canopy, things have been gathering that do not care about the wall or the watch, or the kings fighting their wars in the warm south. He can see nothing. The forest is the forest, and whatever is in it keeps to the dark and the distance. But he was at the fist. He knows what the dark contains. He does not need to see it to know it is there. He puts his hand on Longclaw's hilt. He stands at the top of the wall, with the cold pressing against him, and thinks about what he is. He is Jon Snow to the brothers who know him here. The steward who went missing and has come back. The boy who saved the Lord Commander's life. The crow with the Valyrian steel sword. He is Jon Stark on a piece of oilcloth-wrapped vellum inside his cloak, sealed by a king who is his brother and carries auburn tully hair and their father's spine. He is Aegon Targaryen in an old man's memory and a sealed letter still in Robb's coat. The name that belongs to him in the way that inheritance belongs to a person, real, and yet entirely dependent on whether the person decides to claim it. He is the son of a woman who died in a tower in the Red Mountains, smelling of blood and roses, in a room full of the blue flowers she loved, with a secret she pressed into her brother's hands, because it was the only thing she could still give. He is the son of a man who played the harp and believed in prophecy, and rode into a river crossing to fight for what he thought was coming, and died there in the water, with rubies flying from his armor, and never knew that what he left behind was standing on top of a wall of ice 700 feet above the world, looking north at the thing prophecy actually meant. He does not know which name is real. He is starting to think the question is wrong. The names are all real. The question is which one he lives by, and what he lives by is standing right here. The wall under his feet, the cold in his chest, Longclaw under his hand, and the dark ahead of him, full of the only war that has ever mattered. He is a watchman. The watch is all there is. A raven lands on the parapet beside him. He does not startle. He looks at it. It is a black raven, entirely unremarkable, the kind of bird that haunts every castle and every tower and every high place in the Seven Kingdoms. It has nothing on its leg. It is carrying no message. It simply lands beside him on the ice and folds its wings and stands in the cold and points its beak north, the same direction he is looking, with the serene indifference of a creature that has no particular opinion about kings or names or the wars of men. They stand there together, the boy with the 3 names, and the bird with none. Looking north, waiting. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 Kingdoms and beyond, then please